to connect our work to these lands. You are welcome to acknowledge the land that you are joining from using the chat. I would now like to warmly welcome Dr. Natasha Boskic to deliver the opening remarks as the distinguished initiator of this event, whose dedication and expertise have guided us for a remarkable 10 years. As the director, LDDI, Natasha considers the direction that the Faculty of Education will go in relation to innovation and good practices in teaching and learning in alignment with the strategic goals of the faculty and of the university. She also teaches as a sessional lecturer in the MED program. Your enduring commitment to this TEC Expo event, among other initiatives, have been truly inspiring, and we eagerly anticipate your valuable insights once again. Over to you, Dr. Natasha Boskic.
Thank you very much, Faeyza, for this introduction and for the land acknowledgement. It is really my pleasure and enormous privilege, especially because this is the 10th year, the 10th anniversary of that event. Similar to, I think, the field we are in, the technology field, our team has changed over the years, our event has changed over the years, and I think every year we learn something new and we adapt and we provide some other insights or different way of sharing knowledge. And especially in this era where so much is happening with technology, I think it is so critical to have these opportunities to showcase your work. Even if we have questions and if we are struggling with something, it doesn't always have to be success. And success is so difficult to measure in technology field because you never know what will the impact actually be in years to come. So I'm looking forward to all these presentations, again, to learn more because we never stop learning, which I think is the excitement part of our life. And to see what others are doing with technology, with tools, but more importantly, how the students are learning and what is different for them and what is different for those who are teaching the courses. What does it mean to engage with these tools and really explore them? Are they helping us? Are they making us, are they changing us as well? And how much they become part of us. So welcome everyone, and really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, we never stop learning. And with that, I'll go over the agenda today. So we have 6 very exciting presentations. The format of the presentation is that we will have 30 minutes for each session. The presenters will do their presentations, taking 10 to 15 minutes. You are welcome to post your questions during that time in the chat. But after the presentations are complete, we will open the floor for discussion. We'll begin our first presentation. We are almost at the top of the hour, so we'll start at right now. And we are delighted to welcome for our first presentation our lovely Dr. Sofia Noori from ECED and Dr. Jamilee Baroud and Kalisa Young from LDDI. Their presentation is titled Supporting Teachers to Address the Mental Health Needs of Newcomers from War Zones. With the world once again afflicted with war, atrocities, humanitarian crisis, and unprecedented human rights violations in this time and age, this is a timely presentation. The floor is yours, Noori, Jamilee, and Kalisa. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you so much for that very warm welcome. I'm really excited to be here. I also want to thank the Expo organizers and the LDDI team for putting everything together yesterday as the start of this lovely event and continuing on today. It is with great pleasure to introduce to you our online manual for teachers. This resource is created because, as many of you know, we are having a growing number of refugees coming to Canada in the hundreds of thousands. and teachers are really struggling to help these students. And this resource is a place for us to go to as teachers and as educators, kind of like a one-stop shop place that we can gather and find information just as a starting point, and then take those resources and hopefully make them useful in our classrooms. And this is part of the knowledge mobilization project that was funded by the Jacqueline Farquhar endowment grant. And I'll be doing this presentation with Jamilee, and Kalisa will come in whenever she feels that she wants to. A little bit about the rationale behind this, as I mentioned, is to really help teachers because they play such a critical role in the student success, but they often lack the necessary training and resources to provide effective support. Oftentimes students deal with language barriers, cultural differences, and even the teaching methods that we have here. This manual has a lens of mental health associated with it. So it is really there to help teachers not only foster inclusivity and openness, but also help them deal with some of the traumatic responses that students might have due to war, due to living in refugee camps, due to escape. And there are 5 chapters in there, and my lovely colleague Jamilee will now walk you through that for it.
Thank you, Sofia. Yeah, we wanted to showcase how we were able to kind of represent all of the content that Sofia had gathered into a resource that we hoped would be accessible to a diverse audience, not only in terms of who could access it, but then also how they could access it. So we originally had talked about whether we should represent this content on Canvas and talked about a multitude of different ways that we might be able to represent it. And at the end of the day, we had decided to house it on a tool called Articulate Rise 360. And Kalisa, please feel free to jump in at any moment in time, of course. And so what you're looking at right now is the final version to date, at least, although there is more content to come, of the content that is now ported onto Articulate. So quickly, I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of, again, the why we chose Articulate, because of course there are many tools that we could have chosen from. But one of the very core reasons we chose Articulate is because it's an open educational resource, which means it can be shared as a link on different social media platforms and via email, and can also be embedded within Canvas and external websites without requiring viewers to create a username or password, which we hope would enhance our ability to share the resource both within UBC and beyond. I'm just going to switch screens here too. This is the editing view. Can you see that I've switched screens here quickly? Okay, great. And I just wanted to showcase quickly what I mean by that. So at the top right corner here, you can see there's a button called Share. And when you click Share, you can kind of preview the link here. And so this link you can copy and paste, and as I said, kind of embed it on any social media platform within Canvas catalog, via email. And so we really wanted to be able to have this kind of ease of distribution, both from us and then within the community as well. And the second reason that we chose Articulate is because it automatically adapts content to be viewed on different devices like desktops, cell phones, or iPads, which would in turn increase the amount of viewers who could accessibly access the content. So just to give you another example, up here on the right-hand corner, if you press preview, you can see that you can preview how it might be accessed from the viewer from a desktop, but also from a tablet, the tablet landscape, a mobile portrait, and then mobile landscape as well, so that you can ensure that your content is being represented the way that you hope it to be represented, despite the device that viewers might be accessing it. We also hoped that this way might also serve to kind of bridge that digital divide. So if you don't have access to a desktop or laptop, you could still access it through your cell phone, and it would be equally accessible and useful to you. The third reason is that Articulate has a beautiful selection of stock photos. So I'm going to go back to edit just to kind of show you a little bit about that. So if we go to introduction, for instance, I'm just going to kind of add a plus button, not to give you a big tutorial, but just to kind of showcase some of the images that you might be able to incorporate. So if you chose image, for instance, we could just randomly select this one, and then we go to edit, and replace from content library. You can see here, there's such a vast variety of images. And so if we put at the top here, I don't know, like even if we just tossed in the word kind of refugee, to see what comes up. I just wanted to showcase like the extensive content library that is housed within Articulate. So that was another reason you don't have to pay extra. So if you already have your subscription, then these are all free to you, which we thought was a really fantastic feature. And lastly, Articulate has interactive activities and quizzes built into it. So if we go back to our resource here, I'm going to show you one of the sections of activities just to kind of highlight some of the ways that we integrated it. So one of the cool activities that you can use within Articulate is this case-based scenario feature. So you can select the human that you would like to kind of host the case-based scenario. The image in the background you can also select. And so if you like select continue, basically the idea is that the question would pop up as a case-based scenario. So in this case, we're speaking to educators, and the question is about how to effectively support refugee students. So an interesting thing here is if you select the incorrect answer, first of all, her emotions will change, which I think is a really fantastic feature as well, is that there are like hundreds of emotions you can kind of put onto these humans within this to kind of represent how you might be feeling about a particular response, which we thought was interesting. So the answer is wrong, she'll say no, and also give the explanation as to why it's wrong. And you can always try again for the correct answer. We'll get another response from her and then a yes with an explanation. So that's one feature, but there's also fill in the blank option. So we took this directly from the content that Sofia had input. There's also multiple choice with multiple correct answers, which is also helpful. And we also have some matching activities that you can incorporate. This is another fill in the blank here. So we just wanted to quickly justify, why we thought that Articulate was appropriate for the content Sofia had created, but also for the audience that she created. And I don't know, Kalisa, you have something else to add, but after that, we'll go back to Sofia just to dive a bit more into the content.
Thanks, Jamilee. Nothing more additional to add. It's just that we had a fantastic time working with Dr. Sofia through this process, and knowing how well it has been received and the feedback that has been given so far, and the far-reaching output that the hopes are that it transcends not only just British Columbia, but other provinces throughout Canada, because we can see the impact that refugees who are coming in, especially children, and the support that teachers need within the classroom. So that's just what I needed to add in as well.
Kalisa.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure working with this team. Jamilee and Kalisa, Eduardo did a fantastic job of really taking the content and making it into this really interactive website. And I couldn't have asked for anything better. As you can see from what Jamilee is sharing on the screen, is that there are hyperlinks to all the both academic resources. So if the teacher looks at one of the resources and says, hey, like I really want to learn more about this, they can easily click on the academic resource and be sent to that either website or wherever the academic resource is posted. There are videos that are embedded, there are images that are embedded that are mostly referenced, and they can watch, or they can go to that website in particular, because we can't put every single thing on this wonderful website, but we have to be able to give enough information, but also detailed enough that teachers can find use in this. If a teacher had chosen to, so one of the things actually before I get to that, if we go to chapter 4, this chapter is particularly important because I think it's important for educators to understand that this is not just a teacher's responsibility, even though the teachers are so influential in the lives of their students, that it is the entire school environment. So other people also play key roles in this, whether those are the administrators, the counselors, the welcome centers. These are all people who are involved in making a really great and hopefully safe environment for the students. And because this resource is specifically geared towards teachers, the final chapter, which is chapter 5, has a resource bank. So the resources bank ultimately shows information not just from the curriculum, which is really important, but also storybooks, novels, and these storybooks, novels, and graphic novels, they're all written by Canadian authors. I really wanted it to be Canada-centric because I'm hoping that our teachers will be able to make use of these. There's also memoirs. These are novels or autobiographies written by refugees themselves. And the links are there too. So if you click on the link for me, please, you will see that it actually opens to local bookstores, our own bookstores here in Vancouver. And so we're supporting our local businesses that are run by racialized and Indigenous people, which is, again, another thing that was really important to me, to have these resources available to us. And then the other interesting bit about this is teachers can decide how they want to use these resources. There are video games. The video game was actually initially hosted on the UNHCR website. So it's a really interesting video game that is in multiple languages that can actually give some insight and understanding even to a young person who plays the game about what the process of becoming a refugee is. What are the things that young people have to think about when they leave their home countries due to conflict and war. And in light of what is happening around the world, there are actually 30 conflicts, 30 wars going on, and Canada is hosting people from all over the world. And in British Columbia, the largest populations are coming from Afghanistan, Ukraine, Syria, Venezuela, and Eritrea. So we are going to be adding the last two countries onto our website. That is in process. But this is just, for me, an incredible place for teachers to come in, get the materials and information that they want in a very accessible, easy way. And it's extremely pleasing to the eye, but once you're in it, it's extremely engaging. So hopefully many people will be able to have access to this. Right now, the EDI individuals from all the districts in the Lower Mainland have access to this now. And this coming Friday, I will be workshopping this at Abbotsford. And at the end of the month, I will be going to Kelowna to workshop this for their human rights officers in the districts in that area. And then finally, I will also be going to Hubenig in January to help the district there use this material for their teachers. So already we're having wonderful responses and to this website from people who have piloted it and from teachers who are really in need of a place to go to get the materials to help these students. And I am deeply indebted to the LDDI team for doing such an incredible job with the material. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sofia. I'm just remembering now that we also have a link to the resource for anyone watching, and we have a link to the survey that we created as well, because it was really important to Sofia to make sure that she gathered all user feedback to ensure that the content was accessible and useful, and to make sure that she could continue to improve the resource over time. So we will pop those links into the chat if you are curious to complete the survey and or view the resource in and of itself. I will do that right now.
Thank you. That was a lovely presentation. Great to see the modules in action. Are there any questions? And you are welcome to unmute yourself to ask a question. So I'll have the first question. I'll begin with that, and then maybe Gabrielle has raised her hand. But we usually use Canvas as one of our platforms to host all of the content. So can you speak a little about your experience? And I know that, Articulate Rise provides more features in terms of interactivity, but were there any things in the Canvas that you would have preferred? And, it's always those pros and cons when you are using different platforms. There are certain features that are more useful in one, but you still miss a few in the other. So can you talk about those experience, Canvas versus Articulate Rise?
Sure. Sofia, do you want, maybe I'll pull up the Canvas catalog that we actually used, and we can speak a bit about how we kind of blended the worlds together. So I'll just pull that up give me one sec. Sorry, my multitasking skills are failing me. But I'm going to pull it up right now. Okay, so yeah, that's a great question, Faeyza. And so we really did want to make sure that we were servicing like the UBC population in and of itself, but also one limitation that we had learned about Articulate is that in terms of analytics, they are quite limited. So although it is accessible and we can share it, it does not have the same analytics features that Canvas Catalog does, for instance. So our solution was kind of to bridge both worlds. And so what we did for Sofia was kind of house an introduction to the content in Canvas Catalog so that if we were sharing the resource within the UBC community, we could still log how many people were accessing it, how many were clicking the links, how often they were on the resource. So we had a bit more knowledge about who is accessing it, how often, and all the analytics that kind of Canvas comes along with. So what we did was, and in addition, so Eduardo, we must have a big shout out to Eduardo, who really did create this entire Canvas catalog course and created all of this media. So designed this kind of image at the top for advertising, and also filmed a video with Sofia and incorporated all these amazing graphics within, just to give a bit more of an overview of the resource itself, which we also have housed in Articulate, but is here as well. And then again, just quick resource information. So we did think it was important, of course, to have the land acknowledgement integrated, an overview of the resource as well. I'll just click on here. And we also wanted to include, of course, a bio of Sofia, which is next. And again, Eduardo, beautiful photography. And how to navigate the resource. So we have all of these kind of tidbits tied into Canvas Catalog, which we found. So we did find it still useful, I suppose, is my point. And we really wanted to bridge and blend both worlds. So again, Eduardo created this amazing list of kind of instructions so that there's ease of access for people, and then accessibility features as well. So although there are built-in accessibility features within Articulate, we wanted to ensure that people understood how to navigate Canvas Catalog accessibly, and also understand that within Articulate, you do have accessibility options as well. Sofia, I don't know if I missed anything.
Yeah, no, that's great. The only thing I would add is even for people who don't have access, like for example, they don't have CWL to access the Canvas, Eduardo also did an incredible job of giving kind of a step-by-step to do in order to actually create an easy CWL in order for them to access this. People who, for example, when I showcase this to the ministry, or when I'm showcasing this to people who are in different districts who have no affiliation or access to UBC, can still go through that process. It takes a couple of more minutes, but because I want the analytics and I really want to know who is accessing the manual, it's just an excellent way for me to know. So they go through the Canvas process by creating a creating an account and then being able to use it. So it's been really, really great. So again, shout outs to Eduardo for his assistance on this for sure. I guess, I don't know if he's here, but yeah, thank you so much. So I guess
I just wanted to add about in order for the user to access the Articulate, we could only embed a link that then opens out into Articulate. So with the limitation there, we're not able to embed the the entire articulate or anything from articulate into catalog. So that may come across as a limitation, but it is one click away.
Yeah.
And it takes you straight into the modules. And we didn't add each module at a link there, just one link that takes you to the articulate.
To the entire thing. Oh, great. Nice.
Okay, Gabrielle?
Hi. Yes, I've just been very happily clicking through this resource. It's like really beautifully put together. And I'm excited to hear that there's more development coming with more content. So that's really cool. I really appreciated how you mentioned, like, you've really tried to make it specific to a Canadian context. But is there any intention on sort of expanding this beyond Canada? Because I think that this is something that could be really utilized in, like globally. I mean, the resources and the experiences are going to be, are the experiences of refugees globally. And I could see this being really useful in a lot of contexts outside of Canada. Is there an intention to do that as well?
The intention is to get it as wide of an audience as possible. As I mentioned, there's over 30 conflicts in the world, which means all the surrounding countries that are receiving people fleeing from war and conflict are having to deal with these sort of things. In order to expand it to that level, we do have to also consider who we're showcasing, how much we're showcasing, and the data keeps changing. So the information that I have provided on this resource, I've tried to be, as I mentioned, as general, but also as, direct as I possibly can be. And it's very difficult because depending on where students are coming from, they might have different needs. They have different gaps in their knowledge. They have sometimes, not that they have too many gaps, but they have too many curriculums. They've been, jumping around from country to country or place to place, and it becomes very difficult to then be a host country. The other issue is also many people who become refugees are living on the borders in like tent towns sometimes, and there are no schools, there are no teachers to make use of this resource, for example, immediately. But for host countries where they're coming to resettle for longer periods of time, I think this would be an excellent resource for them. But again, it would depend on what the resources for those countries and those first spaces are. Like for us, we generally look to our Ministry of Education for policy. We look for Ministry of Education for resources or districts to provide this to us. Unfortunately, there's not really much in the Canadian context. So my hope is right now to really focus on British Columbia as our main place and then expand this nationally. I would love to have an international forum for this. I think it would be really, really great. I think the intention is definitely there. I have an amazing team in the LDDI to support this, and I think we can do a lot with it, but this is the start for sure. Thank you, Gabrielle.
Thank you.
Natasha. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for this wonderful presentation. Really great work. I think we all have the ideas about how you can expand on it. so I have a similar question. And I know there is so much work around refugees and immigrants and people moving from leaving their places and things. But we have a lot of conversations lately about climate change and sustainability and, all of that. And we'll touch on some of the presentations, we'll touch on that area as well. And I'm just wondering whether you consider doing something about climate refugees, right? And I know it's a completely different, but it's still equally traumatic experience, whatever the reason is. So that's my question.
That's an excellent question, Natasha. Thank you so much for posing it. In my books, those who escape from crises like climate crises are considered refugees. However, in the international definition of refugees, they are not included, which makes it very, very difficult to, again, it becomes another barrier in order to provide resources and to support these people on a humanitarian level. And so what I would say is, even when you read the country profiles, you will see that these countries, although they are suffering from war and the people are being displaced, that they are also suffering from a climate crisis, right? So there are droughts that are happening in the same countries. And for example, in the case of Afghanistan, we have 40 years of war, There's also been drought. There's also been famine. Recently, there was an earthquake. There were, I believe, 8 earthquakes within a span of 10 days on a Richter of over 6-point magnitude. So that is very, very extreme, right? That's people's homes have collapsed. They are now internally displaced. And there's so much to say about that. But I do agree with you that those issues are merging. And they're becoming more and more evident to the international community. And we're having it even here, right? We had forest fires that caused people to be evacuated, and they became internally displaced too. So yes, it is a growing issue. It's a major issue in the world, and I do agree that refugees are being created from climate change, and it is talked about a little bit in the content, although it is not the focus, because the focus of the content is really how can we help our teachers here with the knowledge and understanding and the strategies and techniques and resources to help the students once they arrive here. So it is spoken about, but it's the highlight is really to support the teachers. And I look forward to, if there are places within this resource or even creating another resource that's specific to climate crisis responses, I would be happy to continue that conversation with you and the team, of course.
Thank you.
So we have a question in the chat, and Allison asked, what are the next steps in the development of this resource?
Okay, so the next step. So right now it's being piloted, as I mentioned, all across British Columbia, the Lower Mainland. People in the districts have access to this. I'm workshopping this in various schools and districts. And so by the end of February, we will gather again and we will look at the resource and look at the feedback that we've received, because there is a feedback Qualtrics survey for people to take and look at the response. We will update the manual to meet the responses from the teachers, the educators who are the primary hosts of this, or like people who are receiving this. And then once we make those changes, of course, the idea is that we might also be working with the professional development program in the faculty to provide this as a resource for teachers. I might have the acronym wrong. Is it ECPD? Or EPDC? Sorry, I don't know the correct acronym, but you know who I'm talking about. But we will be working with them to perhaps make this as an online course for people to access from across British Columbia. And also I am in talks with the Ministry of Education to see if they can host this on their website, even if it's through an external kind of UBC, like they have to come through UBC to get access to this, that they host it on their website so that more teachers have access to it. So that's kind of where we're at, next few steps, more immediate steps, I guess.
Right, thank you. Mariam, she has her hand up for quite some
Hi,
time.
thank you
That
for
it's a
this
virtual
amazing
hand and not your
resource.
actual hand.
So my question was, like, since you talked about feedback, I'm curious whether you have received feedback and then tailored the resource based on that feedback. I'm curious about what the feedback was and how did you tailor this resource. And also I was wondering whether there's a forum where teachers using this resource can exchange their ideas, because I think while they are going over this resource, there are lots of reflections, I don't know, probably shared experiences, stories, something like a practice community, I don't know, for teachers. And yeah, so.
Yeah, so the first question with regards to, or maybe I should, should I go to the question, the first question, which are both very important. Maybe I'll address the second question first with regards to a forum. So right now we don't have a forum on the website. I mean, it's easy through Canvas to create a forum, a discussion forum where people can come in and share their ideas. There is a part of me that's a little bit hesitant to open that, because I feel like then there also has to be someone to monitor that, to monitor the content, to monitor what is being said. We want to make sure that it's a respectful space, that it's a space of engagement and growth and development, and not something that is regressive. That is one of my main concerns. And then we would have to have someone to do that. With regards to the feedback from what I have seen and heard has been absolutely positive. Everyone has loved the interactive nature of this, to whom I owe the LDDI, particularly Jamilee and Kalisa, for creating that bit of the resource. Jamilee created like the interactive questions and games that are related to that. And I'm very, very happy that all the teachers who I know, who I have directly workshopped this with, have been very, very happy with that bit in particular, that it is so interactive. And obviously the work in terms of bringing in the images and embedding keywords, key terms, hyperlinks, that was all done by Kalisa. And again, teachers are really finding it useful and easy to access. So the easier it is for them to access, the easier for them to get the information, the more likely they're going to continue to use it. So I'm greatly indebted to these folks. And if they have anything to add in terms of the feedback or creating a forum for discussion, I'll leave it to them to respond to that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sorry, Faeyza, I was just going to add quickly. I know we're at 12:30, but
Yes.
just in terms of the survey responses to date, we checked last week, there are about 74 responses. In terms of like recommending the resource and how useful and informative the resource was, majority, very close to all, had said that they strongly agree that they would recommend it and that it was a wonderful resource. It was equally in parts informational, and they appreciated the activities, the audio visuals. They found the design to be high quality, and compared to other similar online educational resources, they rated this either much better or better, which was great. And in terms of the content and the extensiveness of the resource, 66% had said that this was like, they couldn't have asked for anything more. So we must applaud Sofia for the amazing content that she did create and her vision for this. And yeah, so far the feedback has been exceptional.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for presenting today. And I think there is now the audience would also be a means to spread the word around, and I think it was very valuable. We'll post the survey link in the chat. So how did you find this presentation? Please share your comments with us. And with that, we will now move to our next presentation. And so our next presenters are Keri Ewart, who is our lovely Med lecturer and a coordinator, EDI and community outreach. She is presenting on exposing environmental racism through the exploration of education technologies for equitable access with her students, Cody and Carina Losito. So over to you, Keri, and welcome. I'll stop.
Thank you so much. And I have to just honor my students, Cody and Carina, because I'm just along for the ride right now. It's really 100% them. And as new presenters to this series, as well as presenters in general, I'm just here to help. So I can't take a lot of the onus whatsoever. What I am going to do, though, is I am going to put the link to this Google slide presentation in the chat area so that everybody's able to access all of the links, all of the hyperlinks. There are QR codes on most pages, but it actually asks you to get involved, the whole engagement piece. But I will pass it over to Cody to introduce the topic for him, and then I'll take it from there.
Hello, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Today, we are going to be presenting our resource on environmental racism and its connection to education and curriculum jamming, as well as numerous other topics that we've decided to incorporate into our website. I'm Cody Peters, obviously. And I am currently a student in the MET program, and I'm a student of Dr. Ewart in ETEC 590 this semester as well. Unfortunately, my project partner, Carina, is unable to join us today. She is busy at work and she couldn't get the time off. So it is just myself and Dr. Ewart that are presenting today.
Thank you, Cody. And I am Dr. Keri Ewart. I am a faculty member with the Master of Educational Technology program and also the coordinator for Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, Decolonization, and Anti-Racism. And one of the many, many courses I teach is this course that Cody basically, and his partner Carina created this resource for is ETEC 531, and we'll go into more detail about this, but really they are to identify different curriculums that are in need of jamming for the absence of missing voices, missing cultures, missing representation. And they had the esteemed pleasure of looking at the environmental racism and environmental justice as their core piece. So before we begin, I recognize that there is the land acknowledgement, but I am tuning in from Toronto, Ontario right now, and do want to very much appreciate and acknowledge the land of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg, and the Huron-Wendat people. And in doing so, I'm so privileged. I'm actually in BC on Tuesday. So I do want to recognize kind of that world flyer all around, and just appreciative and understanding of the impacts that colonialism has had on our land and on this beautiful space, and really recognizing the Indigenous caretakers of this land. And so this is a very, very important topic in addressing. And at this time, just want to recognize that we've done a brief introduction. We are going to pose this question to all of you. What is environmental justice to you? What is environmental racism? Discuss the necessity for curriculum jamming through education, as well as Cody is going to be sharing his website, his and Carina's website, which is the digital learning artifact and resource that was created. And then we have additional virtual tools and resources. Okay, and then open it up for a really what we're hoping to be, and from what we've heard from the previous presentation, a very rich discussion. So we're asking you to take literally 30 seconds to engage in Poll Everywhere. You can QR code it, you can link on it. Again, I will put, for any new joiners, I will put the link to our presentation again into the chat area. But if you can just take a moment and talk about what is environmental justice to you. You may use examples, but this is a really, really important focus, and I am going to pull this up. So again, you can get this code here. Go into pollev.com / my name, Keri Ewart, 843. Okay. Thank you already. I'm seeing some great resources here. Or some great, I'm reading the word resources. Some great answer here. Excellent. And I think Natasha has ingrained in me the honest to goodness importance of educational technology and utilizing so many different tools in so many capacities. So it wouldn't be a presentation if we didn't do this. So thank you, everyone. So we see things. People can live on their land safely. Love that. Addressing the environmental impact through a lens of equity. Taking care of environment and nature, access to resources. What I love about Poll Everywhere, if people have not used it before, is you can like it, you can dislike it, you can basically go through and identify which answers resonate with you. So it's great to use with students, especially not being able to, if somebody can't come up with an idea very quickly, then they can complement an idea that's on there. Okay. The reciprocal relationship. This is excellent. And please keep these coming, and we're going to post these so that they will be available on the presentation as well. Now, in terms of that, understanding the respect, the safety, the reciprocal nature, I hear a lot of First Peoples principles of learning actually in that whole idea of environmental justice. There is a recording from Carina. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it today. She's in the midst of teaching, but we're so pleased and appreciative that she was able to add this to this. So now we're going to use a completely different tool, Mentimeter. If anybody's used that before, it's menti.com. And I'm just going to put this code in the chat area so everybody can make it easy. So there's menti.com, and the code is 36977923. Okay. And if you can take a moment just to answer in your opinion, and this is a word cloud. So just words, just ideas, any examples that you may have. And I'll take us over to our Mentimeter here. Okay. So again, you can see at the top here, who thought you'd actually have to work for it right now? I promise you we'll give you lots of great information. Okay. Actually, I can copy that link. I believe it will come up. Oh. I'm just going to refresh this quickly. Is everybody able to access this?
I can't see the questions or options when I go in.
Okay, the question was, and you know, if this isn't working, of course, adaptability, flexibility, 21st century competencies. The question was, what is environmental racism in your mind? If you do not have access to this Mentimeter, then can you just, you can post your question or your response in the chat area.
You put the link in the chat, it would be easier to access.
It certainly would. Let's see if you can get it this way. I don't want to take too much time on this, but it's important. Okay. Oh, thank you so much, Gabrielle. You know, as educators, we look down at that little note in the corner there and we see how many people are actually able to access. Again, if we're not able to access that quickly, please just use the chat area if you feel comfortable.
I think chat is probably the best option right now. I'm not seeing the options to post on the Mentimeter myself.
Okay. Thanks, Cody.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what we'll do, just to start this is, we're having trouble with the audio here, but looking at, you can see on this page that it's really marginalized and oppressed communities that are typically impacted by different types of environmental issues. So for instance, the development of a sewage plant, or looking at a kilometer down the road, you can pour water perfectly from a tap, whereas in an indigenous community or on a reserve, there's a boiled water or water advisory in place for decades. Even though government says that this is a major issue, we are going to rectify the situation, but that's not rectified. So when it is a form of racism that is directly impacting disenfranchised, marginalized, oppressed individuals, that deals with their safety in terms of environmental safety, their well-being, and very often, if you think of Erin Brockovich, the movie, if anybody has seen that, a very clear example of environmental racism. We hear in the news consistently about Indigenous water issues, boil water advisories, looking at people in marginalized communities, low-income housing areas that are contracting different types of cancers because of different sewage or different plants that are located in that area that would not necessarily or were not passed in more affluent areas. So this is basically the whole premise of environmental racism. And there is, and thank you. Sorry, was there a question? No, we are getting into this. We will have a very good conversation about this afterwards. I do just want to play Karina's The Necessity for Curriculum Jamming.
Cody and I learned during our time in ETEC 531 that curriculum jamming refers to the act of redesigning or reframing an area of a curriculum in a manner that focuses a critical lens on the content. This is done by engaging students in activities and experiences that allow them to reflect on and think critically about what was missing or misrepresented due to the way information was originally presented in their learning. In our initial search for existing information and resources on environmental racism, Cody and I found that there is a lack of material aimed at elementary school students, with still too few resources addressing environmental racism in the first few years of high school. In fact, Cody and I discovered that many adults we spoke with as we designed this resource could not explain the term environmental racism, nor give examples of its existence in their own province or country. This highlighted for us a glaring omission in the curriculum. We could see the need for a resource such as ours to introduce the topic of environmental racism and justice in an educational setting, with the aim of creating a more inclusive, equitable, and culturally sustaining future.
All right, and now I'd like to pass it to Cody to demonstrate this incredible resource that they have created. And I'm going to go to our live version of the resource, and I will put this in the chat as well so that everybody can follow along.
So, as we've mentioned, today we're presenting a resource that we've created for ETEC 531 that touches on environmental racism, its implication within the context of education, and some of the ways that we as educators can begin to incorporate these topics into an educational context through curriculum jamming, the generation of online open access resources, and learning scenarios that can function in both individual learning experiences and group or classroom settings. This project was built in the winter term 2 of 2022 for Dr. Ewart's ETEC 531 course that myself and Carina participated in, and has since been expanded upon by all three of us. We're working with the Ministry of Environment as well as the Ministry of Science to further this project, as we each believe in its value as a resource. To start things off, we begin at the homepage of our resource. In order to retain a sense of personal connection to this project, we felt it was important to establish our everyday context of our lives within Canada with a land acknowledgement. This draws attention to the unceded nature of the land on which we reside, and keeping with this theme of individual connection, we move on to establishing who we are, both myself and my partner in this project, Carina, as well as outlining our introduction to this resource and our reasons for pursuing this topic. We also include our own definition of what curriculum jamming is, why we're drawn to it as a concept, and how we envision it influencing this resource. Throughout the homepage, there are numerous resources, such as a short YouTube video on environmental racism, our outlines for the EDIDA framework and how it informs our design, the Universal Design for Learning, and several other sections that highlight and contextualize this project within an educational framework. We really wanted to bring an emphasis to this and to establish a baseline understanding for all of these terms as we progress through the project, so as to fully enable users who may not be familiar with these terms or concepts to create a unified foundation for all of our users to build upon as they progress. In the next section here, we have a brief section that touches on urban transformation. If Dr. Ewart wouldn't mind pulling that up, please. Thank you very much. And its relationship with education, environmental racism, and community participation, as we believe there's a strong connection between these topics that merits further investigation. Moving forward, we have embedded a teacher's guide within the website in order to provide an outline and potential rubric for educators who wish to utilize or co-opt this resource for a classroom setting. But within the teacher's guide, we have also included a breakdown of the educational resources that can be found throughout the website, as well as a list of terms that are clearly and plainly defined, as we wanted to keep with our earlier theme of creating a baseline understanding of potentially unheard of or difficult to interpret terms and concepts, really in an effort to prevent misconstrued or misinterpreted terminology. Moving on to the core of the resource, we have a series of lessons that myself and Carina have developed and produced for all grade ranges from kindergarten all the way up to grade 12. Each lesson features numerous different technological integrations and participation activities that are all open access, as we wanted to provide a learning scenario that featured as few barriers of entry as possible. Each lesson is clearly outlined and broken down into different sections, with each embedded document having a brief summary of the lesson's topics and activities, as well as a suggested grade range, along with justification for the suggestion, so as to provide a sense of what level of competency should be expected from participants should these lessons be integrated into a classroom setting. Moving on to the next section of the website, we've established several areas of research that both myself and Carina, as well as Dr. Ewart, are interested in pursuing in the future, as we believe each of these topics, ranging from the historical roots of environmental racism in urban areas to advancing climate justice, are each extremely impactful on the educational context of environmental racism. There are several other tabs and components to the website, including an About Us page, which can be found here. On this page, you can find a brief introduction to myself and Carina, as well as a podcast episode that contains a reflective discussion between myself and Carina as we talk about our motivations behind this project. Additional pages on the website include a list of our academic sources, which we utilized in creating each resource that you can be found throughout the website, and informed our design process as we built this project as a whole. There's also a page that contains additional links to related resources that users may be interested in exploring themselves, should they want to dig deeper into the topics on their own time. Lastly, we've integrated a feedback function embedded within the website, as we believe that in order to continue developing this resource, we need to integrate user feedback into the future iterations of this project to better facilitate as intuitive of a learning environment as possible. We believe that by gathering feedback and integrating it into our future revisions and additions, we can continue to expand upon the topics of environmental racism in a continuous dialogue on its implications.
Thank you so much, Cody.
My absolute pleasure.
Just to finalize this section so that we can get to all of the meat and potatoes of it all, are additional environmental justice digital tools and resources. These are fantastic. These are being added to the website. So we have the first, it's a climate reanalyzer. You're able to look at every form of data in terms of climate change, global racism in terms of climate change, global warming. This one here is an interactive atlas that looks at a number of different historical representations of climate racism, climate data again. We have our looking at our future. What does the future look like? This is a game that students can play at all ages. It's actually vetted for K-12 students. Looking at the Earth and seeing the different areas. Again, you click on, you're able to find information on that particular part. If you hone in on different areas, you can identify different types of environmental justice issues that are prevalent in that particular area. We have this particular website. It is the Global Atlas of Environmental Justice. And again, with tons of data and information. We have our online opportunities for educators who are looking to promote digital environmental justice, especially in the age of COVID-19. So it's different initiatives that students K-12 can take on. This is one example in order to advocate for environmental justice. And then finally, K-12 STEM or STEAM resources that focus on environmental justice in many different capacities throughout the world. So it gives a nice cross-sectional aspect to that. Okay, so at this point, we would love to open the conversation for critical dialogue. And Cody is going to vet most of the questions. Karina,
we'll attempt to do so at least.
But I am here as well if needed. Thank you very much for listening.
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful presentation, and I can see a lot of work has been gone into it. I really liked how you had those learning resources and activities for K-12. My question would be, can this resource be used in higher education, and what would it take if you want to cater to our audience like we are in the higher education?
Absolutely. We focused the lessons that we built for K-12 because that is where we saw the greatest deficiency in resources when talking on this subject, but there's absolutely application for higher education as well. Each of the lessons that we've integrated in here, the ones meant for K through grade 6 and so are a little bit on the juvenile side of things if we're talking about post-secondary or secondary education, but the grade 8 through 12 lessons are absolutely applicable. A lot of them involve researching your own neighborhood, your own community, the spaces that you occupy in a digital sense, what communities, what echo chambers are you inhabiting, a lot of self-reflection. So it is absolutely applicable to higher education.
Great.
And just to add to that as well, the work that we're doing with the environment, the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Sciences and Technology are geared towards the undergraduate and graduate studies level with appropriation to teacher candidates being used in the K-12 grades as well. So there is a lot of ongoing work that's happening with this particular resource and really excited to be supporting that work.
To build off that as well, that is primarily the reason behind the next step section. These are areas of inquiry that we haven't had a chance to delve into too deeply yet, but would absolutely be applicable to all grade ranges, including post-secondary.
Any other questions? You are welcome to use your mic to ask a question, or you can put it in the chat. How do you plan to promote it? Because one of the things is, when you create a resource, how do you then market it, take it to the people who can actually make use of it? So do you have any contacts that you are introducing it in the schools here?
We are currently working on getting it into the hands of educators. As mentioned, this is an ongoing project. It's still being developed. We plan on expanding upon it as much as possible in the future, provided all things, including funding and application aside. But we would like to have it hosted through a couple of different options, either through the British Columbia Ministry of Education website or the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy, or even through UBC's programs as an online resource. With our focus on open access, the promotion of it is relatively easy. I mean, getting the link out there will take some time, as all things do, to generate traffic, but we are definitely trying to get it into the hands of educators. That is our primary goal.
Great, thank you. And I see Natasha has her hand up.
Sorry, I was muted. It's not really a question. It's just, again, thank you for this wonderful presentation and for bringing this to us. And I know it may be premature, but it really nicely responds to Faeyza's question. This is a conversation that we're having with the presenters at the moment to really make their presence more visible and more frequent in our faculty. So hopefully, for those who are listening to us today, we'll have that opportunity to share and work with Carina and Cody more, and with Dr. Ewart, of course, and have some of this available through LDDI or however we can share that. I think it's just one of those projects you want to tell everyone about. So
we're extremely excited about future options.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, comments? People are still thinking. Actually, this, climate racism, was that the term? It was still new to me. I mean, there are so many new terms that are emerging, and it feels like that all the learning we had when we were in school and college, it's kind of, we didn't learn these things because these problems are becoming in the forefront right now. I think at every level, there is a need for that, ongoing learning and education. And I think all of us still need to go through these kind of resources, and they're valuable for everyone, So thank you so much.
There's a question in the chat. Yeah. Have you had any or plan to collaborate with other environmental organizations? Jesus, Christmas Christ. Yes, we do. We are open to it. We don't have any plans currently, but we are absolutely going into different avenues for collaboration. As Dr. Boskic mentioned, we are working through a bunch of different avenues through UBC as well as other organizations in getting this resource out there, getting collaboration, and increasing the accessibility to this. And of course, if you have questions or if you have comments or interaction that you want to share with the website, you can always use the share feedback function of the website itself. We do check that, and we do go through that and try to integrate any options or constructive criticisms that come our way.
Great.
As well, everybody has their emails here. And so if you have any questions, or if you have any ideas or wanting to connect with Cody or Carina on this particular project, there's a lot of grant writing happening right now and funding towards this project, because it is such an important area right now of examination. And there's also talk of podcasts and a number of different ideas. So it's a risky and exciting time, especially for students, to put their work out there. But this work is really, really important. and needs to be put in the hand of everybody. Now, they say, is there limited to Canadian entry or open internationally? That's a really good question.
To touch on that, we are absolutely open to international influence. The only reason for the Canadian scope for this project was because of myself, Dr. Ewart's, and Karina's situation where we are all three of us living in Canada. So we wanted to share, building off of our own personal experiences. I don't live, or I haven't lived in any other country, so I can't speak with any form of authority on what the environmental racism looks like in those countries, but I can speak to my own community. That's the reason we have the scope limited to Canada currently.
And it's also a response to a project from a class, and where they had to choose one curriculum, and that curriculum they chose was a BC curriculum, but welcoming and open to building capacity and being able to be representative of more countries, more nations, more cultures throughout the world. I know that Cody and Carina had plans of creating a podcast where they are speaking to people who are explicitly connected to and impacted by environmental racism, and hearing those pieces, as well as policymakers, and discussing ways to improve that issue in that respect. So great questions. Thank you so much.
Yes,
and at this time, I think our time is concluded. Thank you for having us. And you can address everything. Cody and Karina's emails are up there, and I know that they would love to hear from you.
Yes,
Thank you
you
so
all
much.
for listening to us, and thank you for all the kind words in the chat as well. We appreciate it.
Yeah, lovely presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll post the survey link in the chat, and you can give us feedback on this session before we proceed to the next one. So our next session is on artificial intelligence and multimodality. And I'll be presenting this session with Kristofer, and I will share my screen. Yes. Yeah, I hope you can see my screen now. And obviously, I would like to ask if anyone has not heard about artificial intelligence. And I think the answer would be no, whether you have used the technology or not. I'm sure you have heard about it, because we have been all excited and baffled by AI in these last few months. It has become the talk of the town, or should I say campuses in particular around the world. Today, we will look at the capabilities of large learning models to generate AI images. We'll look at a few examples of how these images can be created, some of the new capabilities that have been added to these tools, what are the considerations and our responsibility when we use these AI tools, and most importantly, how can we integrate into our teaching and learning? And so with that, I will hand it over to Kristofer.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Faeyza. So yeah, I'll just be going through kind of the process of, well, first of all, what even is an AI generated image, but as well as how do you actually create one of these as well? If you just go to the next slide, Faeyza. Of course, as Keri mentioned, we love using interactive technologies here in the space. So we'll start by launching a Zoom poll just to kind of get a gauge on what the knowledge looks like in the room today. So there'll be two questions for you. The first one being, prior to this conversation, did you even know that AI or artificial intelligence could generate images? And the second one kind of being of a more thorough response where you have that opportunity to provide more context behind what you do know about AI image generation, whether that's the process, the results, or really anything like that as well. So I'll give us about 30 seconds here, and then we'll take a look.
You can also see how Zoom has these poll features, and you can use it in your teaching and learning.
All right. I'll just give it about 15 more seconds here, and then we'll close the poll. All right, poll is closing in 3, 2, 1. All right, let's end this poll. Great. So it seems like for a majority of people, actually everyone, I should say, everyone's very familiar with or just knows that AI is able to generate images as a whole. In terms of what do people specifically know about the AI image generation, let's take a look. Yeah, so it seemed that there's been a lot of controversy. Yes, they can look very real. Yes, of course. Some people have experimented with some of these tools as well, but not having quite the success they were looking for. And as well, someone noted that it's really able to make unique images that are really catered towards the different needs or whatever you're needing as well. I'll just stop sharing. Oops. I'll head over to the next slide. So yeah, so as you can see here, or just as a whole, AI image generation is a process where you're able to give a generator a prompt. It then takes that prompt, matches it, and does it however it does. And then it creates an image at the end that is supposed to be catered towards the prompt that you gave it before. And in terms of what some of these tools are, there's a lot of different tools that do this. One of them being OpenAI's DALL-E. This is the same company that operates ChatGPT, so you're likely familiar with that. Stable Diffusion is another one, Leonardo.ai, Midjourney, as well as Adobe's Firefly. A lot of options, again, for that image generation as well. In terms of how to create these images, generally they all need a prompt of some sort. So through this, we'll have a series of Zoom polls where we'll get to kind of build a prompt together in some way or get to really experiment with AI images. So in the next series, you'll see a number of different AI-generated images and then a few questions there as well. So the first one here is, what is the prompt? So we'll head over to the next slide, Faeyza. So as you can see here, we have an AI-generated image on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we have a number of different options of potential prompts that may have been used to create this image. So I'll just be launching the poll now, multiple choice. Feel free to just select whichever prompt you think was used to create this image. All right, seeing some good responses coming on in. I'll give it another 20 seconds or so. Great. Polls closing in 3, 2, 1. All right, so let's see what everyone thought. Okay, so it seems like a majority of people thought that E was the correct answer. An origami pirate galleon centered in the middle of the galaxy, surrounded by stars and other origami creatures. I love that. C was the second one, or second most selected, and then B was also selected as well. So I have a surprise for all of you. Actually, none of those are the correct answer. So the correct answer actually is A. So Faeyza, if you want to hit the slide there.
Yes.
Yeah, so A was actually the correct option, but I think all of you actually identified very key features of a good prompt. So while A was the one that created it, of course, option E and D as well as C, they're all very specific and descriptive. And that's one thing that's very important when it comes to generating these images or creating a prompt to generate these images. You have to remember that all that's being done is they're taking the text and then translating that into images. So be as specific as you can, as well as being as descriptive as you can, will create an image that is very much in line with what you might be imagining as well. So if we just head over to the next slide, Faeyza. We have another image here. Fun fact, this image was actually created using the exact same prompt as the last one. But as you can see here, it's definitely more of a different look. It has a different styling. And that's one important key thing here, is that there's different styles that can be applied to these AI images as well. So if you just head over to the next slide, Faeyza. Stable Diffusion, which was what was used to create those two images we just saw, actually has over 106 styles for you to pick from when you create these images. So these are the most popular, I think it's 16 or 18 or so. So as you can see, they all use the same image. They're just changing the styling a little bit. So in the top right-hand corner, you have neon punk. Bottom right, you have pixel art. If you take a look at all of them, you'll see that they're all very impressive, I will say, for something that wasn't created by a human as well. So from there, that kind of dives us into the next question here is what is the styling? So if we head over to the next slide, we'll see another image that was generated by AI. But your challenge here is to actually identify which styling was applied to this image. So I'll relaunch the poll, and then we'll take another gander at the results in about 30 seconds or so. Great. I'll be closing the poll in about 15 seconds here. All right, in 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's end this poll. All right, so as you can see, we have a pretty good diversity of opinions here. Lots for the origami, definitely can see that one. Lots for the neon punk as well. I can see that one as well in terms of the colors. But a fun fact is that there's actually neither of those. It's actually E, which is low poly. So Faeyza, you want to click the slide there. If you take a look at the bottom of the boat, you'll see that it has those polygons, which is kind of gives away that it's low poly, but again, not entirely clear as well. But there we have it. So that being said, I'm sure if I did not tell you that any of these images were generated using AI, you'd probably assume that I'm an artist myself, or I found these on the internet somewhere. That's actually something to also consider as well. The fact that if I didn't tell you that, would you be able to determine that or not? And that kind of brings us into the next section of the presentation, where we're taking a look more at how good are we at really detecting AI images. So on the next slide, Faeyza has actually generated images for us to take a look at. 3 of them are AI generated and 1 of them isn't. And your task here is to determine which one is not AI generated. So relaunching the poll here, I'll give us about 30 seconds.
We have 4 options, and I think the poll says 5, but you can choose.
Yes.
Yes.
Right, seeing some good answers coming through. I'll give it about 5 more seconds here.
I think those who are selecting E is like they are not sure.
All right, let's close the poll and we'll share the results. All right. So as we can see, lots of people picking C, some picking B, some picking E. Maybe you don't know, that's all right. So the correct answer actually is C. So nice work.
Oh,
Curious to know what everyone's thinking in terms of how they picked that one. But I know that for myself, at least when I did this, definitely D and B didn't look quite right, especially when you looked at the grass. It looked a little too smooth. I don't know if I've ever seen smooth grass like that. And then between A and C, kind of just took a guess there. But Faeyza, I don't know if there's anything you would like to add more on that.
No, I think that's the thing. You need to really need to have the detailed eye to see how would you differentiate, and it comes with experience, especially if you're working with AI tool. And I know, Chris, that you have been working with creating AI images, so maybe you had a better understanding in that sense. But it does take time, and you will learn through experience. So here's another challenge. Let's move to the next one.
All right, polls relaunched. So same thing here. One of these is not AI generated, but the other 2 are. Let's see what everyone's thinking.
And so these images focus more on objects. So we had like pumpkins in the foreground, not really the scenery that we have in the previous images.
All right, seeing some great answers coming in. I'll close the poll in about 5 seconds or so. All right, in 3, 2, 1. All right. Nice work, everyone. So B was actually the correct answer. That one is not AI generated. One thing that I actually did not get this one, but one thing Faeyza did point out to me when she showed this to me was that the background for B, you'll notice that it's blurred, and that's something that's not noticeable in A or C. And to my knowledge, that's something that's actually that AI has challenges doing, if I'm not mistaken, Faeyza.
Yeah, that's true. And it varies with different tools that are there for creating images. But with these images, another thing to note is that we need to cite them when we are using in our work, and that's a good practice. So you can see at the bottom of these images, I have kind of highlighted how you can cite it. And when you are citing the images that are AI generated, you have to share the prompt. That's a good practice. And also mention the tool that you use to create these images.
Awesome.
Okay. So that brings us to the question of, are there any issues regarding bias, ethics, and other considerations when we are using these realistic images? So can you think of a few issues that could arise when we use such images? Although we had tools like Photoshop, where we could always improve or change the pictures that we took, or we could create images of our own, like icons and other things. And we have great artists, digital artists, who have been using these tools to create images. But what do you think that with these AI tools that can help us create images, what could be the potential downsides? You can write in the chat your response. So Lisa has a comment on the previous images. As for B, you could see the residual seeds left over from the carving, which likely wouldn't be included. Nice. Yeah, that you have attention to detail, right? So that's what's needed when you are looking and going through these images. Good catch, yes. So any issues, anyone, you are welcome to open your mic and chime in. What do you think is can be an issue with realistic images? Authorship. So Natasha thinks authorship, yes, that's very true. We may not know who the author or who's the person who has created or taken this image and what is the source of this image. One of the things that has been greatly talked about these tools is that they have started to add watermarks, but it is not there in all of the tools. So may not be an option for you to directly find out if a tool, if an image is AI generated or not. And so there's a problem of deep fakes. Yes, exactly, like Christina mentioned. And as you are preparing these presentations, and as you know, new AI tools are coming out, there's actually a website where you can go in and create deep fakes. Well, we could always manipulate the images. As I mentioned, Photoshop and other tools were always around, and we had those situations in the past as well. But then what do these tools do? They actually reduce the barrier to creating these deepfake images, and without any way to identify them, they'll be spreading rapidly all over the internet, and they can actually cause harm. They can, as you can see in this image, this could affect our thinking, what we are thinking, the reality and the fake news may combine, and we may be truly entering a post-truth world where it would be hard to make out what's real and what's not so. We have talked about that these images are very realistic, and that's true with LLM models. They can do a few things very, very well, but they have issues and limitations with doing some other things. So we created these images using the AI image generator that's now available through Canva. And Canva is a tool that we use for creating infographics and presentations. And you can see in this image, the angle of the pen is not correct. And even the writing is blurred. And for such images, you can easily see that it is very easy to actually give away that that's an AI image. And you may not actually want to use it in your practice. So you will keep on prompting the tool to come up with new options as this one is not viable. Similarly, these tools have problems with counting. So if you ask them, let's say, create 5 balls in a park, they may not give you 5 balls, and the image generated may have only 1 ball or a few bubbles. So they have really big issues with images. And writing is another thing where if you ask them to add some text in the image that is being generated, they either make the words fuzzy, they cannot write them well, or take the part of the phrase and not all of it. And there could also be situations where it would be highly inappropriate to use AI images. For instance, this is an AI-generated image of totem pole. And these sacred images, and we need to be really respectful about these things. So there would be definitely certain situations where we would want to not use AI images, and that would be part of the critical literacy and our own understanding where we decide, and that these images should not be used. At the moment, these tools do not have any guardrails in this regard, and you give them a prompt and they can generate all types of images. Even they can mimic the actual people and their faces. And there is bias in these tools. You may have read a lot of articles that have been written on that. And so we have chosen a few to show you here. So this is a prompt that has been given to a tool to generate images for toys in Iraq. And you see that all the images that came out are soldiers with guns. And so this is a big issue with bias. This is a image that got generated through the prompt, a portrait photo of a person. So in the first one, we see a person playing soccer. So it's all male, and you can see the color. So there's a certain bit of racism involved. So, there are certain cultural bias that's embedded in there. If you look at the picture on the right, which is on the cleaning, so anyone who's cleaning is usually a woman, we can say that this is kind of a representing the bias or kind of professions that are more dominant with these kinds of people in the society. But we know that these images do not take a particular aspect of history into context when they are generating these images. So that kind of bias or that cultural context may exist in certain point of time in history, but may not be applicable today. So there is a chance or a likelihood that the images that may be generated may propagate more bias that does not exist in the society, or that we may in the society be working to address. This is also an image that I generated using Leonardo, which is a great tool. But you see that all the images that are generated are male doctors, and nurses are always female. Even if you ask it to create a female doctor, the options that it generates, there would maybe 2 images with doctors and a third one with a female doctor. So this is the bias that is inherent in these tools. And as users of these technologies, because the tools do not have any guardrails, it's our responsibility to then address them and keep on prompting the tools to come up with better prompts, or maybe ditch the tools and use real pictures if they are not meeting our standards and our needs and the ethics that we live in our society today. So along with the bias, there's the issue with ethics and copyright. So these large learning models have been trained with some copyright images that have been created with artists. And we know that, art sells at high prices, very valuable. Artists spend time in creating their artwork. So moving forward, what is the best way to protect the art? So recently they have launched this application, which is called Nightshade. And what it does is that it blurs the image. So when you are sharing your artwork on the website, you can apply this kind of a filter, can blur the images of the objects that are in the artwork. And that way the LLMs are unable to properly identify and detect the objects. And that actually forbids it from actually using the same image to train itself, either to generate a similar or maybe the same image in the future. And so now, after quickly looking at the issues with AI tools, we move on to see, what are the possibilities of integrating it in the classroom. Like all technologies, our tools are not perfect, and it's the use and the context that make us feasible in certain areas. And so AI tools, especially with the capabilities to generate image, make a good case. I've tried it with young kids where they are actually learning to add descriptions to their writing. And if you ask them, give me a prompt or explain what do you want to create or describe your picture, you can take the words that they are using to describe their thinking, put it in an AI image generator tool and generate the image and show it to that child, and then work with them to add more details to that image. For instance, a child may be saying, I'm playing soccer in a park, and you can give that prompt and an image would be generated, but they may then say, I was playing with my friends. So in the actual description that they use, friends was missing. And so you add that, and the AI would prompt the AI tool again with this additional prompting, and they'll see they are playing in a group, and then they may ask for other things. So I think this is a great way to improve the language learning capabilities at different levels. So recently, we worked with an instructor, and Jamilee in our LDDI team worked with Danny Bacon in EDCP 305 to create an AI assignment where the students were given an option to use AI to generate images. And so activity involved using AI to create visual, which could be a song, poem, 2D image, or it could be a short story. And this shows a way where you can actually add variety to your work. And we know that in online learning, especially in the discussions, in Canvas, we use the discussions a lot, and it's always, we give them a prompt and students have to write something. So this is a good way to make your assignments and work and activities multimodal. It ties in with the universal design of learning, and students can not only try these tools, but again, explore the topic through different lenses and angles that can enhance and add to their learning. And our language, even when we are talking, we have expressions. It's not just the words through which we convey. Emoticons, whenever they are added to the language, it conveys those emotions. And now we can use these tools to actually, bring our ideas and to life. And so there are definitely some advantages to it. But what we also recommend in terms of best practices, that when you are creating these AI assignments, always give choices and include options. So far, the AI tools that are available, none of them are have passed the FIPA law, and so FIPA copyright. And so when you are asking students especially to sign up, they are signing up with their actual username and password. So the privacy and safety is a concern, and that should be brought. Some students may not be comfortable doing that because they are not UBC supported tools. Also, again, from UDL perspective, giving them option and choices now that you can make the assignments multimodal, so they can go with the text option. They can even use audio or videos, and now there are AI tools that can actually generate animations and do the videos as well. So there's that variety in that sense. We always recommend providing guidance on how to size and reference resources. As I demonstrated earlier on, there are APA and MLA guidelines that are coming even now, where you are unsure, the instructors and share examples. And then the students can also, along with the prompts, add description or details of how the tools were used and in what context. And they can also reflect whether these tools were useful or not moving forward. Limitations in terms of ethical concerns, bias, and other issues that may be more relevant to the context of assignment or the course itself. So we always encourage having that discussion with the students, along with sharing the critical literacy resources. Because we have different expertise, the tools are changing, our knowledge is emerging, and that collective knowledge sharing is very important when it comes to using these tools. And here we have mentioned the tool, and maybe if you have the link, you can paste it in the chat as well. So Hugging Face came up with the Diffusion Bias Explorer, and that's a great tool where you can give a description or a prompt and then see how the bias reflects in the images that is produced. So this is a good tool that can be used in the classroom with the students to bring attention to the bias in these tools. So as we can see, the technology that creates some problem, we are again relying on the technology to come up with the solutions. But as you may have heard with AI, we always say that, keeping human in the loop. So these are the tools that humans have created, and although we are calling them artificial intelligence, and we can learn through them, but ultimately it's the responsibility of us as human beings to control what these tools can do for us. And so at this point, I would like to end with this final thought for you to reflect and think. That's around social fairness and the bias and other ethical concerns that are coming across these tools. So mathematical truth and social truth are fundamentally different systems of logic, as Meredith Broussard reminds us. And it's ultimately the responsibility to use a computer to solve every problem. It's impossible actually for computers or digital technology to solve those problems. So why do many people believe that using more technology, more computing power will lead us to a better world? And that's a question for us to think when we trust our tools and technologies. And thank you. And I'll open the floor for questions at this point. And I'll stop sharing my screen. Mariam, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you for the amazing presentation. I found AI citation very amazing. I mean, I have never seen that, like AI citation, especially when you include the prompt. That's very accurate, I think, and I think we need it. And also, you showed us a Canvas page where the instructor, where one of the assignments was to produce a visual, a poem, a song using AI. I was wondering what learning objectives would instructors have when they assign something that actually requires the students to use AI. I mean, what would the learning objective be? Okay, as an educator, I ask my students to use AI to do a particular assignment, no matter what program, but I'm just thinking what the learning objective would be.
Yeah, good question. Jamilee, is she around? Would you like to chime in? Because I know she helped the instructor with this assignment, so maybe a few words from her.
Hi, that's a great question. Yeah, if we're referring to Danny's, I can actually, I'm just going to pull up the assignment. We did develop kind of a list of learning objectives. And I think what we really wanted to make clear was that we were not obliging students to use AI. And so although those were parts of the learning objectives, was if you do choose to, then of course there will be these learning objectives associated with, inputting a prompt and what you kind of do with that content. But in addition, the other learning objectives were about, understanding really the ethical implications, and especially also the bias within AI. So we kind of combined both worlds within these learning objectives. I can pull them up and kind of post them in the chat as well. Might just take me 1 second. But what's really important to note is that before even having a discussion about the assignment, we did assign the resource that LDDI created about kind of like the FAQs about AI. And those really were related to, fake news, copyright, ethics, bias, safety, just to make sure that they had a good sense of those basic concepts and terms before the assignment. And we also hosted kind of a facilitation/workshop where we really dive deep into those topics so that by the end, we made it clear that we weren't biased in either direction. They had all the authority to choose whether they wanted to use AI or not. But the purpose of the facilitation was simply to ensure that they really felt informed about the decision that they were making, so that they weren't kind of blindly going into it, feeling safe to use it, because it's kind of a classroom assignment. So that was one of the big key ones. I'm just going to pull up the list that we kind of determined if it's helpful or not. Guiding questions. Okay. So the rubric is a different beast, but I'm just going to copy and paste in the chat kind of what we had online. So that's kind of how we tried to combine both worlds. And so by the end, even if I think a really important piece here is that you can integrate content and assignments about AI without actually asking or encouraging your students to use AI. And so although I think a lot of these learning objectives can be associated with using the tool, they don't absolutely have to be. And so we really wanted to empower the instructor and the students to know you can learn about AI, but you do not have to use it. Like that's simply not necessary to gain those kind of critical digital literacy skills.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Jamilee.
Thank
And in
you.
the interest of time, we will not take any more questions on this one and move on to our next presentation, which we are also very excited about. And so I would like to, I'll share my screen and I would invite Lisa Meneian from ECED, Gabrielle Coombs, and Eduardo Rebagliati from LDDI on their presentation, Optimizing Accessibility for Visual Learners, the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Early Childhood Education Program. Welcome, presenters, and please take it away, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Faeyza. Okay. So I'm going to let Lisa start us off. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Lisa Meneian, and I'm currently an adjunct professor and cohort advisor for the deaf and hard of hearing cohort for the early learning program within UBC. So next, please, Gabrielle. And I have my team here with me, Gabrielle Coombs and Eduardo. You guys, oh, there's Eduardo. Do you guys want to take a minute to yourselves?
Sure. So I'm Gabrielle Coombs. I'm a learning designer at LDDI. And Eduardo?
And yes, I'm Eduardo, the learning technology specialist at LDDI.
Thank you. So this project is very much a labor of love, and there's a much larger team behind those of us that are here today. So we certainly thank them all for their work. But we're going to get right into it because I know that we're short on time today. So why did we create this program? Well, several years ago, I began discussions with one of my colleagues at UBC, Dr. Janet Jameson, around the critical shortage of early childhood educators within the province, and specifically those that are that have the skills and background and knowledge to work with deaf and hard of hearing children provincially. So each year in British Columbia, there are approximately 500 deaf and hard of hearing children that are from the ages of birth to 5 years old. And we know that all children benefit from play, learning, and social experiences in early learning programs. And we know that the outcomes for children are better long-term if they have participated in early learning programs. But this critical shortage of early childhood educators, not only within British Columbia, but across Canada, has created significant barriers for all children, but particularly we're looking at deaf and hard of hearing children. So we know that this critical shortage also includes issues around the access of deaf and hard of hearing adults to become early childhood educators and to support our kids provincially. 27% child care centers actually turn away children because of,
I'm not the only one that references.
And 77%.
Lisa, you're mute.
Sorry, somebody muted me. Am I okay now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And so 77% of childcare centers actually have children with additional support needs in their care. We also know that the unemployment rate for deaf and hard of hearing Canadians is 32% higher than persons without disabilities. And when we say disabilities, we're using a medical model of disability to establish those statistics. We also know that 21% of deaf and hard of hearing persons are employed full-time, and 42% of deaf and hard of hearing Canadians are underemployed, meaning that they're working in jobs that are well below their qualifications, skills, and experience. Next slide, please, Gabrielle. So secondary to that, and in connection with one of the key principles of learning for deaf and hard of hearing children, is that all deaf and hard of hearing children benefit from interaction with adults who are deaf and hard of hearing themselves. And having a lived experience gives them a unique insight into the strengths and support needs of children with varying hearing levels. But as we said, there is a critical shortage of early childhood educators to support deaf and hard of hearing children, not only provincially, but also within our specialized childcare centers that are in the Lower Mainland that specifically cater to deaf and hard of hearing children who have continuously faced closure because of these staffing shortages. And this unique kind of qualification and knowledge in understanding deaf and hard of hearing young learners connects to issues around learning support, environmental considerations, social and peer support, language modeling, ways of being, cultural knowledge, and self-advocacy. And again, these are all identified areas of need in the principles of learning for deaf and hard of hearing children. Next slide. I think it skipped one. There we go. And so looking at the adult deaf and hard of hearing learner that we would be working with at UBC, we have to look through a lens of these students, not just as learners that cannot hear. So we had to consider what these unique characteristics of adult learners are. And coming from a trauma-informed lens and considering their own experiences as children in their formative years, looking at and understanding the lifelong impacts of language deprivation that they would have faced, including a lifetime of limited access to information, language, social discourse, and the resulting impacts on cognition and cognitive development, including language processing, working memory, as well as, of course, English language development, including vocabulary, literacy, and in essence, they continue to be English language learners. Now, just to clarify that language deprivation itself is not the result of something that is lacking or missing within the person. Instead, it is actually a result of the societal and environmental barriers that have contributed to the development of a disability itself, where none actually existed in the first place. And unfortunately, this cycle continues into adulthood as these learners face and continue to face language suppression. So that is a continued lack of access to information and language due to the chronic societal and environmental barriers, including those within post-secondary education systems. We also need to consider the intersectionality of deafness that may coexist with other identities, including students that may have emigrated from other countries. And all of the rights of these students are clearly outlined in the UN Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, as well as the Accessible Canada Act, which was ratified in 2019 and recognizes sign language as a language of deaf persons. And more recently, the Accessible BC Act, which identifies and recognizes sign languages as the primary language of deaf persons in BC. So we've embraced this project with a vision of a strengths-based approach and with the lens of deafness as ethnicity, thus recognizing that the shared experiences of deaf persons mirror those of other ethnic minorities. Next slide. So some of the barriers that we examined to current online learning for deaf and hard of hearing learners include, for example, the vocabulary and language used. So the high level of academic vocabulary and jargon, the continued use of live captions and relying on live captions and the poor quality of these, the lack of access to American Sign Language interpreters, issues of divided attention when videos are used and students are having to read captions and pay attention to video at the same time, or when there is any kind of live online learning happening, issues of divided attention of having to watch an interpreter and missing what the instructor is focusing on. We also had to consider the cognitive fatigue and overload as deaf and hard of hearing learners are working extra hard to piece all of the information together that they're presented with in multiple modalities. The heavy reliance on videos and podcasts in online learning platforms, which are not accessible, and missed opportunities for peer support and shared learning opportunities, particularly because of the shortages of sign language interpreters, and also the learned passivity that develops in deaf and hard of hearing learners because they are working through an interpreter on an ongoing basis. The quality of the captionings is an issue that we're going to talk about in the next slide, which perpetuates a cycle of language deprivation and is a form of language suppression in itself. So we were very aware of the missing link in that social cultural model within online learning platforms, that there is a diversity deficit, that there are continuing institutional barriers, both physical, environmental, information, and communication, as well as attitudinal barriers. And again, if we look at it from a social and cultural model, that these barriers are a consequence of a lack of systems organizations and social organization. Next slide. And so looking at the accessibility model that we have co-developed, and we also had the unique experience of working with and being able to hire a deaf consultant in the development of our program. But working with captioning standards as they were set by and are set by the Canadian Association of Broadcasters, specifically the Joint Societal Issues Committee on Closed Captioning Standards, working with ASL interpreters that are registered and qualified, students being able to have direct communication with instructors in ASL for discussions and support and not having to always work through an interpreter. Readily accessible notes and module notes for each lesson through PowerPoint downloads. And then, of course, of great importance is the cultural competence of the learning platform and the learning design, making sure that we have representation and that diversity is included, not just in photos, but also looking at the written language, the use of deaf children in the images and video that are actually using American Sign Language to communicate. And just keeping in mind with a bilingual, bicultural model that we endeavor to use with the children and should be using with the adults as well. And next slide. And I'm going to pass this over to Gabrielle now to speak to.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. So as Lisa has already discussed, this program has involved sort of a lot of different considerations, and something that has been really critical to the success of the program has been ensuring that any video content, and there is quite a lot of video content for this course, for this program in general, that everything is captioned really not just adequately, but really well. I think that this has been a really great learning experience for myself and for Eduardo as learning designers and tech specialists in thinking about what accessibility really means. And the captioning is kind of a really good microcosm of describing what that means. So thinking about things like open and closed captions, so whether the captions are burnt in to the video or whether they are things that you can toggle on and off, what kind of vocabulary is being used. Again, Lisa mentioned earlier that a lot of the time, auto-generated captions, like the ones that you might be using for Zoom right now, are usually really bad with technical vocabulary. They might recognize something as something else. It happens often, with, again, technical language or, quotes or jargon or slang. And the other thing too with captioning is thinking about things like sentence structure and grammar and punctuation. obviously spoken English is not the same as written English. And so making sure that the use of grammar and punctuation is sort of facilitating the understanding of the context of what's happening in the video. The other thing too, and this has been critical for me in my work with sort of captioning some of the videos that we have, is understanding how important it is to indicate who is speaking, especially in a video with multiple speakers. If there's someone speaking off camera, indicating that in the captions as per those guidelines that Lisa mentioned earlier. The other thing too, things like background sounds, including those, they can be really critical for understanding the context of what's happening. And then really importantly, tone of voice. I think now to a video that I captioned earlier, and we had a video of a young girl who looked really distressed, but she just had this incredibly like beleaguered tone in her voice, and trying to make sure that that was captured because, you know, words are only a small actual amount of communication. Tone is really critical. So making sure that in the captions that those pieces aren't missing as well. So captioning has been a really big part of this project, but that is a component of the video work which has been done. And I'm going to pass over to Eduardo now to sort of go into a bit more depth about how we achieved some of the video for this, this program.
Thank you, Gabby. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about how the videos were built. And then we can also have some ideas from Lisa about the rationale for how the video was organized. So we basically came up with a system that we developed to build the videos. And this is something that requires some strategic thinking and planning. So some like initial testing to find the best way of producing the videos, because they have many elements and many components. And I'll be sharing some examples so this becomes more clear for you to understand. But once we have developed that system, the process has become much smoother and we're able to produce in a faster way. So I think that one of the essential things when we are creating this kind of projects is always to think with a good strategy, and also like plan ahead how are you going to be organizing the production in different phases. And I will describe these phases next. So we have 3 phases when we are producing these videos. The first one is the actual recording. So that's done by Lisa and using a software called OBS, which is for recording your screen. And we also have the recordings of the interpreters. So first Lisa records the videos, then the interpreters see those videos and make the recording, watching those videos and listening these videos. Then the next step, we go into post-production, which is the whole like editing aspect of the project, and that is done in Camtasia. And finally, we go into captioning, and captioning is it's quite interesting because we tried different platforms to find the best captioning software, or the one that would allow us to make it in a faster and more efficient way. And we tried many of them, but we came to the conclusion that Adobe Premiere Pro was the best one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen and just quickly show you kind of like the final product of what we have, and then some show you also like how we work in the different phases. And I can do that in a couple of minutes, so you get a clear idea of how that's done. So let's see.
Eduardo, do you need me to stop sharing so you can?
No, just 1 second, please. Okay. I'm going to share now. Okay, did you see my screen?
Yes,
Yep.
we do.
Perfect. So what we see here, this is this will be the final product. So
Hello, everyone.
oh no, sorry, this is the thing with the other one. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is what the final product looks like.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Module 4. This week we will be looking at Chapter 6 in the textbook Becoming and Being an Early Childhood Professional.
And Lisa will explain why we organized it in this way in a couple of minutes, but you can see we have the presentation on the left, and then we have Lisa also as the speaker and the interpreter on the right side.
Help us to bridge ideas and practices that are considered in that continuum of play-based learning.
So like I was explaining, we work with different software to build this. The first one is Camtasia. And 1 second here. Oh, okay.
Camtasia is a UBC supported tool, right? It is available for everyone who wants to do these kind of videos.
Yes, that is correct. And we found that Camtasia is really good for editing. In my experience, I've used other software for creating editing, and the learning curve is more complex, but we found that Camtasia is quite easy to control and organize for projects. So basically what you see here on the lower area, we see the different tracks that we have. So this one corresponds to the presentation. I'm moving it so you can recognize it. Then we have like Lisa's window as well, and finally the interpreter. And we found a way of doing this in a more efficient and fast way. So this is all the videos for specific modules. So this will be module 8. So instead of having one Camtasia session for each video within a module, that can be like 8 videos or 10 videos, we end up just creating one session, and then we can produce all the videos on the same session, and that saves us a lot of time. So obviously, like the videos that the interpreters send us have like different dimensions. So there's a whole aspect in organizing the content in one same video. And we also like enhance the audio just for those purposes. And finally, that's phase 2. And then phase 3 is done here. So this is Adobe Premiere Pro, like I was mentioning. And this is great for creating captions, very efficient and very fast. We were quite amazed with the results. So basically, once you load up the video, as you can see the video at the top right, the video doesn't have any captions yet. And we can create, first of all, transcribe the sequence. So what the software does there is it analyzes all the audio and creates a transcription. The transcription is quite accurate. So normally we don't have to do much edits unless we have like some specific words, like technical words, sometimes names of people, these kind of things. So it's not either that we just like process it and it's done. It does require some quality control. So once we have the transcription, we just hit this here to create the captions. And you can see just in a couple of seconds, it generates all the captions for the video. So on the top left, you can see how it segments different parts as the speaker is presenting.
Everyone, and welcome to Module 4. This week we will be looking at Chapter 6 in...
And one of the nice things of Adobe Premiere Pro is that it allows us to have more control over the design of the caps, which is something that we didn't find in other software. So we can, as you saw in the final product, we can change the position, we can change the font size, and of course we can do adjustments to the actual caption. So that's normally kind of like the one last step that we do. We just go over each one of these, just making sure that nothing is incorrect, nothing is missing. And we have found that it doesn't take too much, it doesn't take a lot of corrections, just a couple of things that we normally have to improve for each video.
Great, a lot of work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 more minutes just to highlight.
Yes, thank you. So I'll finish up our presentation just by talking about some of the design work that we've done as well. So obviously the videos are a really critical component of the courses, but we have also been adapting courses that are from the existing early childhood basic certificate that exists within UBC's early childhood program regardless. So what we sort of thought when we took them, that, you know, we'd make the videos and it would be fine, but obviously an adaptation takes a little bit more than that, especially with everything that Lisa had mentioned in terms of, you know, a lifetime of like deprivation from language and the sort of specificities of being sort of bilingual if you are somebody who uses ASL or are deaf or hard of hearing. So for the courses, we had to make some accessibility adaptations, some organizational changes, things like adding really clear headings, ensuring that everything was organized into accessible, smaller chunks. So while the courses that we had sort of undergone a level of accessibility sort of checks, we did find that there was a lot more deeper work that we had to do to sort of get it up to the standard that was really required to do justice to these students when they were studying. So, you know, ensuring that everything had clear headings where necessary as well, reorganizing some of the materials so that it was more predictable, more consistent. And then at some points as well, we found that, as Lisa mentioned, with some of the videos and resources that were present in some of the existing contents, maybe changing or adapting those as well. So in this case, for example, pardon me, I'll go back, we may have you know, some adjustments to make to a video where, you know, it didn't have captions, we needed to add captions. Or if there was a video where we found, okay, maybe it would be better actually to have some representation of deaf children rather than another example of a hearing child, let's, you know, change that content as well. So from this, we've learned a lot. We've learned about making sure that online learning is obviously a great way to make learning more accessible, especially as it pertains to sort of mitigating that divided attention that Lisa mentioned, but that it does come with its own sort of laundry list of issues too. So making sure that if we are using video, that it's captioned adequately, making sure that things are labeled correctly, avoiding, you know, jumping to and from different places. So for example, you can see here that we used an H5P learning object to make sure that students didn't have to move between platforms overly. And then again, really viewing this as making sure that the content is not just accessible but relevant to the group, being more mindful of their cognitive load, things being organized in a way that sort of makes sense for this particular cohort of students. As Lisa said, this has been a labor of love. I'll finish up now. And if we, I don't know if we do have any time for questions, but if there are any, of course, I'm sure we're all happy to field them.
I think we can continue the conversation through the chat. But I will invite the next presenter to do the presentation. It's been amazing to have you, and it's such an important topic, and thank you for sharing your work. So Allison Hubenig, she is a student in the MEET program, and she has an exciting title for her next presentation, which is called Biodiversity, Technology, and Goose. So over to you, Allison.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Allison Hubenig. I'm a current MET student in my last semester in the program, And today I'm here to share with you a project that I did a couple of years ago, actually, but adding on a new twist with a new piece of technology to hopefully enhance it and make it even more interactive. So before I begin, I'll just thank the organizers of the TEC Expo and the LDDI team for putting this conference on and giving me this opportunity. And I know we did have a territorial acknowledgement at the beginning of our conference, but I do want to also acknowledge that in addition to the UBC campus, I am also here on Treaty 6 territory. So that's the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Métis, Dene, Blackfoot, and Nakota Sioux. And I'm very privileged to live, work, play, learn, and unlearn on this land. I did post into the chat 2 links. One link is the link to my slides. And instead of putting my slides up on the screen, I'm going to choose to actually put my project up on the screen. So the slides are there for your reference. They really more are speaking notes for me, but they do include links to the different things I'm going to be showing you. As well, near the end of my presentation, I do have a Goose Chase for you to participate in. And Goose Chase is an app that can be downloaded onto your phone. You can get that at goosechase.com. So if you choose to, you can get that downloaded now while I'm sharing my project. So I'll just share my screen here and we'll get started. So my project that I created as part of ETEC 510 is the Backyard Biodiversity Wiki. And before I say anything more, I do want to acknowledge the team that put this together. So my colleagues, Lee, Neil, Kat, and Danica are also credited here on our project website. They couldn't be here today, but they send their regards and are sorry they couldn't make it. What we wanted to do with this project is we wanted to create a learning piece that would allow students to collaborate, to create, to actually go through and curate some resources and become content creators. We wanted to find a project that was going to give a good balance between working with technology, but also being outdoors. And we wanted to make this project scalable. So our project is actually designed for a grade 3 science class, and that's how we've set everything up. However, I was able to use it in my elementary school with grade 5s, and it was also used in junior high and high school. And we wanted to create a wiki-style project, so something that was editable by many people that could encourage that collaboration. And then finally, we use a photo journal as our main assessment piece to allow students to bring in images and text and hopefully audio and video to demonstrate their learning. The educational frameworks that we looked at here was all about participatory culture. We wanted to give students an opportunity to participate in their own learning. We really looked at this from a constructionism lens and understanding that with constructionism, students are building their own learning experiences and building that learning for themselves. We definitely looked at an iterative design process that talked about creating feedback loops so that students wouldn't have to create a product and then be finished and move on to the next thing. We wanted them to continue to go back and revisit their work. And then we also looked at some of the factors that impacted blended learning, because we completed this project in 2021. So we were, as classroom teachers, working in a pandemic year. And we wanted to make sure that the product that we created could be used by classrooms that were in person, by classrooms that were meeting virtually, as well as by all the other different combinations in between of hybrid models and things like that, groups that were meeting synchronously or asynchronously. The process that we created was a phased process that I'll show you here as part of our curriculum guide. And I'm just going to open up our kind of wiki project outline. It took educators and students through these phases. So acquiring the technology. We did provide a lot of support for teachers within this unit in way of written instructions, video instructions, the minimum technology required, as well as how they could enhance their projects with extra add-ons with different technologies. We wanted to set up the students to start off with inquiring and asking questions. We wanted to make sure that there was lots of time built in to explore, because exploring biodiversity in our own backyards really involves observation and getting time outside. We wanted to make sure that students had the opportunity to create and also to share their work, to give them a sense of ownership over their work. And then finally, we built in the reflection, assessment, and revision step into the final phase of the project that allowed students to go back and to look at what they've learned, to offer feedback to others, and then to continually improve their work. So that product brought us to creating this website that included a teacher guidebook that has the guides and the videos, the technology requirements that I've mentioned. It has the curriculum guide and all the cross-curricular references. We did frame this out of the British Columbia grade 3 science curriculum. And we have a robust list of references as well as our background research. So everything is housed in this one website. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this project in practice for me. So I'm just switching over. I certainly hope you can see my website that says Wetland Wiki. And if you can't, please interrupt me. But this was my project. So the project that I took with my grade 5s. So at the time of doing this project, I was teaching a grade 5-6 split class. I had 9 grade 5s and I think 11 grade 6s. And we were, I had a really lovely group of students who were really, really excited about trying new things. So what we did is we first took the label student out of the room. And when we were working on this project, they were wetland biologists or wetland ecologists. On our website, we had a space for each of them to claim their spot, and they used digital avatars. I have taken out the identifying information for the purposes of sharing this widely. And they got to write a little profile for themselves. And this part they really loved because they could create their own avatar, and it gave them this place of ownership. I split up my students into pairs and teams, and they had to research and learn about different types of wetlands. So I did have some, a pair of students who would get together and they had to come up with definitions, share some resources, include videos, which we see some are no longer available, include information about the animals that live there, about how oxygen is used, and so on and so forth. Once they were finished that, they did the same activity with a new group of people, and they looked at plants that were in wetlands. And again, allowing for the research portion of it, but bringing in pictures and information and becoming owners of this wiki space that everybody has collaborative access to. And then when it came to animals in a wetland, this is where the scaffolding takes place. The students worked independently. So once they had honed some of their research skills, they were given a type of animal, and then they again had to do some research and include some video, pictures, and text information. And then we also did some work with food chains and life cycles that students worked on their own. In these examples, what we did is students had to find videos, but they also had to create an image and actually build something and go on from there. And then I'll just jump to our photo journal project. This was the culmination of the Wetland Wiki unit. And within this particular activity, students had to find images and do a write-up about their reflections of what they had learned. So what I really loved about this project, the strengths of the project, is it was very authentic. It gave students a relevant reason to be outside. It gave them a reason to be observing and, acting like scientists. It gave them a sense of ownership because it was their website. And it was iterative in nature, so students would be able to work on it on their own. They would be able to look at each other's work, give each other feedback, help each other out. The challenges of this project, time is always a resource in a classroom that I find is difficult to have enough of. So there was, some field trips that got canceled due to pandemic related things or weather. So we didn't get out as much as we wanted to. I did have some technology hurdles in that the technology pieces, like my cameras that I wanted to take out into the field at the last minute, my permission was revoked because of fear of the technology being damaged. It was a kind of a cloudy day that day and we were worried about rain. And I also found that the research skills that I tried to teach the students, because attendance was quite sporadic in the year that I was using this project, we ended up in a situation where some students were able to get all of that direct instruction and really hone their research skills, where other students definitely did have gaps because of extended absences. So that is a really quick show and tell overview of my project. I did time it at 10 minutes and I see I'm 13 minutes, so that's not too bad. But what I would like to invite you to do now is, if you have access to your Goose Chase app, I'm going to put a code in the chat here. And when you open up your Goose Chase app, you should be able to see a button that says join, and you put in this code. It's 6XZGV1. And I'm going to share my screen, and I'm actually going to show you the teacher side, the back end of the Goose Chase app. So I will share my screen again and bring you into the teacher side. So what I did with my Goose Chase app is I created a mission, and that mission has 5 different parts to it. There's a little bingo game, so find and photograph a mammal, an insect, a bird, an arachnid, and one other type of animal in your backyard. Find a definition of biodiversity. Find an image of the living thing that is closest to you during this presentation. And then a couple of canned missions that were provided for me from Goose Chase. There is a lot of missions that you can grab and edit slightly, or you can start from scratch and create your own. And for anybody who has gone into that app, and if you have joined with the code, you'll see that I've set up the mission right now to be done in teams. So you can join a team, herbivore, carnivore, or omnivore. And if you're able to, you can try to complete one of those activities. So on the back end teacher side of Goose Chase, what will happen here is as your students or your participants complete their missions and they submit either by taking a picture, a video, entering in some text as an answer, the activity feed will fill up with activity, and then that can be shared, of course, with all of your participants. So when we completed this project in 2021, we had what I really believed was a solid foundation. I worked with my students to co-create the assessment. We worked through things step by step, giving them the support they needed, and the students who were feeling really confident could run with it and really blossom. Students who needed a little more support, I was there to give them that support, and they also got support from their peers in the form of just peer mentorship. And I really love the Goose Chase aspect of this. If I had this technology a few years ago when I was doing this, I would have had my students bring their smartphones out with them with the app attached. And in addition to creating a photo journal project, we would also have been able to participate in this really active challenge. So with that, I will end my show and tell, stop sharing my screen, and welcome any questions you might have.
Amazing presentation. I see that you have covered so many aspects of this topic and so many activities for students to do from different angles. Yeah, amazing. What were the barriers with the students in using these? Because you have introduced multiple technologies, taking a picture, and given the students are like in grade 2, 3, and then this Goose Chase app, what were the challenges in terms of technology?
Thank you so much for your question. So within my classroom, I definitely came from a place of privilege in that our K-6 school, my grade 4 to 6 classes, all had one-to-one Chromebooks. So from the time they were in grade 4, students had access to a Chromebook of their own. So when it came time for things like getting on and editing the website, well, that's something that we had been doing already, and being able to do some basic searches. So technology in that sense wasn't so much of a barrier. What I found was barriers related to going outside the norm of what I wanted to use the technology for. Saying, we have a set of iPads. May I take the iPads out to the wetland today? Or can I take the digital cameras? And I actually we had a lot of barriers kind of when it came to school policy and procedures, and fair enough, to protect the capital investment and the assets that the school owns, keeping in mind that accidents can happen with 10 and 11-year-olds. So we did have some barriers there. You'll notice, or you may have noticed in the photo journal section that I highlighted, some of my students' photos weren't photos that they took on their own. So the way we adapted through that is students were given a paper field journal, and I encouraged them to take sketches and to make notes. And then we found appropriate images that connected back online. So that was one of the barriers. And another barrier was, like I had mentioned before, because of the gaps in attendance during that year, because of pandemic related factors, I did have some students who I felt I wanted to have given more support to with the research process. And, as I even look back now 2 years later, I can see, okay, that section that was copied and pasted off of a website. I did have a student put in, we're from Alberta, but put in a video about a pond in Florida because it was about a pond. So some of those critical thinking skills, that was the other barrier. I think doing it again, I would want to build those skills and develop them first before embarking on this project. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we have a question.
You're welcome. Natasha. Oh, yes. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, and I saw Natasha asked what was the favorite part for students. Well, my students really appreciated the fact that they could be outside all of the time. Even in the COVID years, my class got to take field trips when other classes didn't, because we looked for ways around it. Instead of being on buses, which weren't allowed, we did walking field trips to get outside. And because of the curriculum that I had the opportunity to teach, there was a lot of opportunities for us to go outside. So I would run in my grade 5 and then later grade 6 classrooms seasonal field trips. So we'd go out in September, December, March or April and June, so we could visit the same places at the different seasons, and then they got all of that extra outdoor time. And then also being able to create their avatars and calling themselves wetland ecologists gave them a sense of ownership that I didn't know could happen. Like when it was time for science class, they sat a little taller and they walked a little prouder because they felt like they were part of something bigger than just within the 4 walls of our classrooms.
Great. I never thought one could be an ecologist. So yeah, a great profession to have. Yes, definitely. We have another question from Mariam in the chat.
Oh, thank you. The peer feedback aspect. Yeah. So the peer feedback aspect of the project within my Google site, I'll share my screen one more time and I'll talk a little bit to that. So within some of the sections, I gave instructions right here on the Google site. So I told the students what to do on the page, explain what your type of plant is, find pictures, include facts, and then include references. I like to quantify things for grade 5s. They like that. And then as they were adding their information, there's also sections at the bottom. Oh, goodness. I should have noted where it was. There were some sections where I would include a little text box here saying, please give feedback to your peers. So what are 2 stars and a wish? What are some things you liked about this? What are some things that you suggest could be improved upon? And I'm frantically trying to find a piece. But instead of frantically scrolling, I will just explain. So I built in sections within the website that allowed for students to type in. I did put in a few requirements that if you were going to leave a comment, you had to leave your name or initials. That allowed me to do the assessment piece of, are all of my students participating in the peer feedback? But then it also allowed for clarification, and it gave a sense of accountability too. Sometimes if, grade 5s and 6s are asked to leave feedback anonymously, if something doesn't come across, if it's not communicated well, or it could cause hurt feelings, or it's not clear. So we wanted to have that ownership piece attached.
Yeah, thank you. I also joined the Goose Chase, and I find it very entertaining because, like, if I am a grade 5 student, it's like, now take a photo of you doing a selfie, and now go capture an image of a mammal, an insect. I just think it's a great way of engaging students because it's like including play in education and just makes it interesting. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you so much. And I do want to shout out to Dr. Keri Ewart because I learned of Goose Chase through a class that I took with her this summer, the Summer Institute. And it was incredibly engaging for myself and my group as adults. We were wandering around the UBC campus, snapping pictures and just having a really good time. I see a question from Dr. Ewart in the chat as well that I'll read out. Have you considered having the students create a virtual field trip while on their physical field trip for future students to increase multimodal accessibility? This is a great example of place-based learning. Thank you so much for your question, Dr. Keri. I actually, at the time that I taught this, I didn't consider the idea of a virtual field trip. We were very early on in those kind of COVID years, and virtual field trips were something that we really started to see near the end of 2021 and into 2022 in my school division. So at the time that I had created this, it wasn't something that I considered. But since then, in taking the courses that I have and really looking at multimodality, creating inclusive learning experiences, looking through things through that equity, diversity, inclusion, decolonization, and anti-racist lens, I can really see the value of taking some of these things that we do once and then turning them into virtual experiences to share with all. And I guess one other thing that I should add that I didn't include is we saw a real strength of this project, that it could be scaled to afford global connections as well. So I completed this within my classroom, but if we had another partner class in another country or even in another province, doing things like this and collaborating together on a wiki type space, or even just sharing our learning from one ecoregion to the next ecoregion, is something that can also help to create those connections. All right. Thank you for the question, Dr. Ewart, and drive safe. Is there any other questions?
What is the price or costing of this Goose Chase app?
Well, I use the free version. So with the free version, there are some limitations. You can only have 5 to go, and I could only create a maximum of 3 teams. I haven't looked into the pricing, but one thing I will say, this is kind of an aside, but through my journey, when I started off, I was, in a position where I was really grateful grateful to have the opportunity to do a program, but I wanted to minimize my costs as much as possible. So throughout my entire MET journey, everything that I have created has been on either open education resources or free versions. And I'm really pleased to be looking now at the things that I've done over the last few years and to see that I have been able to do that without having to empty my pocketbook too. So
Great.
yeah, so sorry I can't speak to the price. Lindsay
No,
has a question. I would love to hear what kind of assessments you co-created with your class. So Lindsay, we created what I did call a rubric, but I've now learned is a check brick that just came up with different criteria. So we talked about what our website should be. And because I taught a grade 5-6 split class, we had another grade 5 class in the school. So my challenge to them always was, what does this product have to look like so we can share it with the other grade 5 teacher and she can use it to teach her class? And that was like our guiding principle. So we talked about needing to have pictures that were relevant, and spelling and grammar and everything had to be correct. And you probably saw from the examples that those criteria weren't met in all cases, and that's okay. And we talked about how the other piece of like, how would we do this as a job? So if we're not a student and we're now these content creators, what are our behaviors and our competencies going to be like? So the students also talked about like responsibility and making sure that they were using their class time wisely and encouraging other people. Unfortunately, I'm no longer actually teaching, so I don't have access to all of those kind of historical documents. I was lucky enough to grab the website before my Google Drive got deleted, but so I can't show you that. But those were some of the criteria we had on our check brick. And students assessed themselves, they peer assessed, and then I also had a piece in the assessment.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I think my time is up. It has been such a pleasure to be here. And because I am at work, I'm not able to see the last one, but I'm really looking forward to the recording. So thanks for putting this together.
Great. Thank you for mentioning this. Yes, I can share my screen once again, and you can find the recordings after the session in the following weeks on our website. And now we prepare for the next session. So we have Katherine McGregor and Lindsay Frotton for, they are the MET alumni, and they'll be presenting technology-enabled learning for staff at Mountain Equipment Company. Thank you for coming, and please take it away. And I will stop sharing my screen. There you go. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. I have lost my co-presenter, Katie. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I crashed as soon as I was highlighted. Hello, everyone. Lindsay, are you able to share your screen? Can someone thumbs up me that you can hear me?
Yes.
Oh, amazing. Okay, I will go ahead and share my screen. Give me a minute here, folks. We have both had a little bit of challenges with our tech this morning, or this afternoon, I should say, ironically.
That makes us human.
Exactly.
Yeah, it happens to all of us.
Okay, so I'm gonna get us started, and hopefully Lindsay will come back. Hello, Lindsay. Okay. Can someone confirm for me that you can see my screen? Just
Yes.
a little thumbs up.
Yeah.
So hi, folks. We're so excited to have you join us, or I guess we're joining you because we are also just coming in from our work days. So today we're going to be chatting about what tech-enabled onboarding for MEC staff looks like. Oh, I'm sorry, folks. Okay, we're gonna try this again.
Want me to try sharing my screen, Katie? Now that I'm
That
back.
would be great. Otherwise, we'll just share the link in the chat and folks can open it up as well. That can be maybe a good. I wonder what is funny about our Chromebooks here. Anyone with the link can view. Here we go. Just in case. Here is you should be able to have access to that so that we have a just in case. Okay, let's jump into things. Because I think we want to be mindful of our time. I can't, oh my goodness. Can't confirm that anyone can hear me. Oh no. Okay, so we are both struggling with this. So we're going to pivot a little bit. We're not going to share our screens. We're going to ask you to open up yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you to the folks in the chat who are saving us a little bit. I don't know why we're both struggling with this. This is something that we will have to work on. Is it clear that we use
I can share your slides for you if you want.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I promise we're ready.
We are here.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to start us off. My name is Lindsay. I use she and her pronouns. I am connected to UBC as an alum. I have a Master of Arts from UBC, and I actually used to work at the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology. I'm currently working in learning and development at MEC, or Mountain Equipment Company, and I have put in here my favorite current hobby is making pizza. And I do want to share that I'm coming to you today from the shared unceded territory of Halkometum-speaking Indigenous groups here in BC in the Lower Mainland. The town I live in is called New Westminster, and it's on the banks of the Fraser River, which was a very rich area for trade, and that sustained a lot of life in this area. And I'm also a treaty person. I'm originally from Edmonton, Alberta, which is located on Treaty 6 territory. And I'll pass it to Katie to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your patience with us as we sorted out our Zoom challenges this afternoon. My name is Katie. I use she and her pronouns, and I am a co-lead of learning and development at Mountain Equipment Company with Lindsay. So we're so excited to be here. I am a current MET student. I am finishing off my 5th course, so I'm halfway through, which is very fun. And I'm also deeply connected to UBC because I used to work there. And I have studied a couple of different things in the past, including the adult learning certificate. I used to work in residence life. So if anyone lived in Walter Gage residence, that was the building that I managed for several years. I wrote Donut Eater. I always recommend to folks to go to Fox and Oak in Squamish. I am coming to you from unceded Squamish territory. I grew up on unceded Algonquin territory and currently live in Squamish, British Columbia. So I strongly recommend our beautiful Fox and Oak donuts. I can't take credit for them. I just like them. They're down the street. I will share, just thank you for helping out with the slides here. I will share just briefly before we jump into things about Mountain Equipment Company. So the company we work for operates across the country and is really focused on getting Canadians outside. So when we talk about outside, we're also talking about Indigenous territory. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that that the stores and the company that we work for operates across the country on a variety of territories. So our global land acknowledgement is in fact the entire country. As we jump into thinking about what is Mountain Equipment Company, you probably have heard of this company. If you haven't, welcome. I'll do a little brief introduction. MEC has been around for a long time. Historically was a co-op, transitioned to a company in 2020, and Lindsay and I joined the L&D team in the new era, the company era. You might be asking, is it MEC or MEC? It's both. We don't have a preference, but helpful context, we are a Vancouver-based outdoor retailer, a department store that sells a variety of brands, including our own in-house brand, which is designed by our wonderful colleagues at the MEC label. And we have 25 retail stores across the country and about 1,500 staff. So we are curious to hear who is kind of in the room. And so we'd love if you could use the stamp function, which is just that little pencil on the left-hand side of your screen to identify, like, are you a staff member, are you a student, are you faculty, is there anyone else? And I think Lindsay and I were both saying, like, I am staff historically, student currently, and presently also an anyone else.
Anyone else?
Okay, so it looks like we've got a few staff, some students. Are there any folks who are staff and student? I bet that is true. Okay, cool to think of that we are talking to, we're talking to folks who are staff and students. And I think we are, Lindsay, the anyone else is. So we can clear the stamps and head into our next slide, which is just a route map of what we're going to be talking about today. So we have 4 different areas of our presentation. The first one is talking about onboarding and how we're going to be defining it during our presentation today. Then we're going to have an individual reflection, thinking about how tech shows up in the various onboarding experiences that we facilitate or participate in our various roles. Then we're going to talk about, of course, our MEC case study about how we use tech in onboarding and how we've made some transitions over the past couple of years, especially since all of the changes at the company we work for. And also we'll, of course, dive into some opportunity for some discussion around intentional tech usage in whatever onboarding or welcoming experiences you participate in or facilitate in your role, either as a staff member, a student, or in other workplace experiences. So I'll pass it over to Lindsay, who's going to take us through the first section.
Thanks, Katie. So first, we want to just define what onboarding means. And in our very specific context, in our current roles, we usually think of onboarding when you're coming into a new job. Maybe you're starting a new role, maybe you're starting with a new team or a new organization. You're brought in, you're welcomed into that new organization. There are a number of other ways that we can think about onboarding and the experience of onboarding that we wanted to share with you today. If you don't mind just popping over to the next slide, thank you so much. You could be onboarding into a new class. Maybe you are an instructor or support, bringing students into a new class. That's a welcoming experience. Maybe you are trying to introduce folks to an assignment. That can also be a welcoming experience. Maybe a new technology is being brought on. Maybe there's a new process that's being introduced to your team, to yourself. All of these can be considered onboarding experiences of a sort. So if any of these resonate with you, or maybe you've experienced this, maybe you've gone through a change like this recently, we think that onboarding can apply to all of these. So keep this in mind for your specific context as we go through. And also, we're trying to bring together onboarding and technology. So we do know that these two things can be integrated, and we want to make sure we're doing that as intentionally as we can, even though we know sometimes not everything is within our control. So if you want to share in the chat, we're going to be asking for some chat participation if you're comfortable with it. If you have an onboarding experience that you have either been a part of or been managing recently, we'd love to hear whether is that a new process? Is that a new job? We'd love to hear if you have something to share in the chat. And while you do that, I will pass it back to Katie. We have decided to weave some of the participation throughout our presentation, so it's not just us chatting. But I'll pass back to Katie to kick us off with a reflection.
So now that we've kind of expanded our definition of onboarding, so hopefully it is also relevant to you in your various capacities and roles and hats that you wear, we're going to spend some time doing some individual reflection. So if you could head on to the next slide, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much for helping us facilitate this. So as we think about this question of integrating technology intentionally into our onboarding or welcoming experiences, I want you to take a minute or so to reflect, how does technology currently exist in that onboarding or welcoming experience? And then really consider, what are the goals of this onboarding and what are the constraints? And so when we were thinking about how we can talk about MEC's onboarding with folks who might not necessarily be doing staff onboarding in the ways that we are, really thinking about the goals and constraints sounded like a helpful way to think about what are we trying to get to, and is our technology helping us achieve those goals? And then also, what are the understandable constraints? And you'll hear us talk through this a little bit as well in our case study. So I will just take some time and give us about maybe 30 seconds, a minute, we would encourage you to type this out in the chat just to have some, so that we can read some of your responses. And this is an opportunity for me to stop talking and be comfortable with the silence. So I will do that. And we'll just look for your responses in the chat.
I think if people want to speak, they can use their mic.
Yes, absolutely. And we will have more of a kind of like directed discussion in our section 4. But of course, feel free to unmute and share if that's something that you feel called to do in the way that participation feels good for you. Okay, so Bree has shared in the chat. Hi, Bree, we're in a class together. Yeah, working in an office with student employees and co-op. Yes, I know that experience, especially working in the university kind of context of bringing new folks in often. I used to work in an 8-month, 4-month cycle in student housing, interviewing like 800 candidates every February. Was very time consuming and also wonderful. Oh, hello. Yeah, time constraints, no current use of technology. Yeah, I often share with folks that in developing e-learning that it takes longer than facilitating or developing facilitation.
May I talk
guides.
about my onboarding experience?
Yes, of course, go for it.
Yeah, so I would say my new job actually involves facilitating education through technology. So the goal, which I love, is to produce education programs that are more accessible, and so a lot of tools and are used. The constraint for me can be like, I might sometimes feel overwhelmed, like there are so many like tools and different software, and I'm like, okay, which one should I prioritize and which one should I learn first? And yeah, so that's my experience.
Yeah, I can relate to this also, and thinking about our facilitation, which tools to incorporate so that we're not also overwhelming our learners or the folks that we're also onboarding into these things. Like those are real constraints, as like just the level of new information that we can take in at one point. Yeah, maybe we will move on to talking a little bit about our case study. So I'll pass it over to Lindsay to get us started.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody for sharing. I think you're going to see some similar themes come up in our specific experience that we've having to design and launch onboarding programs for our staff at MEC. So I'll start with our goal. All of our new staff to feel ready and excited for their new adventure when they come on with the company. And we have a number of technologies that staff, maybe will say they have to jump through a lot of hoops to get to the onboarding that we have for them. So they have to get access to their email. They have to make sure that all their information is complete in our HR software. We have multiple compliance training platforms. And so I'm picking up some of the themes we've seen here, like having either a lot of technology or having to gain access to a centrally managed suite can be challenging. And finally, we use a platform called Thinkific to host the actual exciting onboarding piece about, what do we do? How can you contribute? What do we stand for? Everything about MEC. And so we're going to focus just on talking about specifically Thinkific, because that is the tool that our team has control over. We currently don't have control over any of the other technology that exists in the onboarding process. So that for us is a constraint, but it's one that we have to work within. So why do we use technology, and what problems are we trying to solve, and how does this help us achieve our goal of making sure staff feel ready? So our team worked to implement online onboarding, and this was to remove very, very long lecture style days where people would come in and they would be sitting in front of a PowerPoint for upwards of a week in the past, and slowly it got whittled down to 2 days, 3 days, and we were able to condense all of the content to speed up this process, and also to give staff the chance to kind of get comfortable at home before they get into the retail store for the first time. So for retail staff, we have an online portion and then a chance for them to come into the store, meet their teammates, and participate. We actually have the reverse or not, I shouldn't maybe say the reverse, but we have a different program for our staff who work in our home office, which is kind of the corporate center of our company. They will also participate in the online course, but they have a different onboarding that is conducted either remotely or in person in our office by our colleagues in HR. So we have two slightly different models because we're trying to make everyone feel ready, and that feels a little bit different when we have the flexibility of the retail stores and we are wanting to build the connections among our office staff. And I will pass it over to Katie.
Thank you. And we can click on that little play button and maybe make it a little bit bigger. I want to give folks a sense. This is just a screen capture. Oh no, you can request access. Oh boy.
Oh no.
Oh, I feel
given
like
access.
Sorry?
I mean, is it your work-related thing? I don't know if I will get the access.
It is a video that I should be able to change access on. But I think what I'll do for now is say these slides are in the chat. I encourage you to take a peek after. This basically is a short video that's a screen capture video of what the Thinkific platform looks like. If you have been in a course with me at Met, you probably have seen some Thinkific work because I've really built upon my my knowledge of this platform through my academic studies, and I will change the access in these slides after, so folks, anyone with the link will be able to have access. But ultimately, it's important to know, because we work in a corporate context where we're applying these concepts of technology and onboarding and thinking about it not only from an education lens, but also from a business lens, that we actually have indicators and good reporting on our engagement and staff retention. And we know that since we have implemented in our retail and also corporate settings, better onboarding that includes like less time being lectured at and more time connecting with colleagues and applying your new knowledge and new skills, that we actually have increased engagement and significantly better staff retention. This has been true in our retail stores as we shifted to that hybrid model, but it's also true with our corporate home office, which I think is really cool to see. Ultimately, like I always say, if you work with me, you know, I always say I'm here to make work a better and more positive experience for everyone. And I think that starts from before day one. We definitely have some constraints. And so that brings us to the next slide of like, not everything is perfect. I think it can be easy to walk into a beautiful mech store and say, I bet all these people have this perfect training experience. I'm sure you think of that every time you walk into a store near you. But the reality is there are real constraints, and we continue to explore those and try to think, put on that hat of what do we have control over and what do we have the opportunity to either more explicitly guide someone through, or can we streamline all of the tech that folks have to go through? And also, like, we need compliance training that is just the reality of the experience of staffers. And so we definitely don't want to walk in and say this is a perfect model, but it has been really cool to see, especially those engagement and retention scores for folks who have been new to the company since these changes have been implemented over the past 2 years, really, really go up. And the other thing is we use Thinkific through for product knowledge, which is training staff on the products that are being designed for Mech Label by our local Vancouver-based designers. And these products are in all of our stores, and we train staff using the Thinkific platform as well. And we've seen adoption increase over the course of time. It's definitely not perfect, but it's been really cool to see that as well. So for our next little while, we do want to move into some discussion. We want to hear from you and get some conversation going, because I think that's important. So our discussion questions are, I'll pass it over to Lindsay to introduce our discussion, actually.
Sure. So if you do use technology, and maybe if you don't use technology, do you feel like, or do you have any metrics to show that the goals of your onboarding or welcoming experience are actually being met? This is our first question.
Like thinking back. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You're going to say thinking back to our earlier reflection. So thinking about the reflection where you're identifying the goals of your program and the technology you're using, do these two things actually line up? Because we've found, oh, I'll see. Ooh, that's such a good question. Freeze asking.
Yeah.
Measuring the efficacy of onboarding. Yeah, that's a good one. Katie, did you have something you were going to share?
Yeah, it's actually a conversation that we're having about, in addition to the engagement surveys that we have, and also just retention numbers. How do we specifically report on onboarding is a conversation that we're currently having. We have, again, some real constraints when it comes to the ability for us to gather information from, it's really about like, how do we send out a survey, for example? What platform? Because we have a variety of platforms. Who owns that survey data? And when we have a small learning and development team, there are time constraints, as Lisa, I believe, mentioned. So we are looking at making something that is hopefully a little bit more specific to onboarding. In an ideal world, that would look like implementing probably over the next 6 months, I would say, is a realistic in advance of our summer seasonal hiring, is preparing our store learning assistants, who are folks who work specifically focused on learning in the stores, and our store managers, with a process of probably a 30-day survey. And then the real question is, like, if we're going to gather that information, how do we make sure that we actually use that information? Because we're asking staff to fill out. We want to make sure that we build that trust and are acting appropriately on that information. So it really is about working with our coworkers and our colleagues across many stores. We have a very classic problem, I think, with a medium or large company. If you roll something out, you're rolling it out to everyone. I think that's an experience for folks who work as staff at UBC. That's a very similar experience. I know I would work in it when I was working in a residence life population of, like 1,400 students. I couldn't start small. Like, you have to do this all the way. And so that's something that we're mindful of. We're also in a very significant period of change. And so we're letting things settle before we roll out something new. My goals are largely centered around how many questions a day I get. Yeah, absolutely. I think that is when we think about, especially working with student staff, or just like new staff who are like really eager and like excited about their role, they're going to be asking 1,000 things. And so where is an opportunity for folks to self-serve with that information? And in an ideal world, they can go back to, for example, a Thinkific module or some centrally hosted content. We use Microsoft SharePoint as a space where folks can go and access information. There are store-specific spaces that might look like Canvas in a university context, or shared drives even. How do you orient a new staff member, a new student staff to the way that you store information?
We will jump to the second question here, but I wanted to jump up in the chat a little bit here. I saw that Lisa made a comment earlier. Time constraints, no current use of technology. This was actually something that we found, was that when we were not using technology, we were able to get people in and out a lot faster, because you're not waiting for the setup time. You don't have the lag time of trying to like find reporting and go into different websites and try and make sure people have access. It's very fast when someone shows up before you in person, or whether that's virtually, like in a virtual meeting, and you're able to talk through things and, maybe share some slides like that. That itself can be a huge time saver. So if you have a time constraint, maybe not using technology is actually meeting your goals, which is totally fair. And that's something we kind of wanted to bring to this conversation, is like, are we, and we ask this of ourselves quite frequently, is how can we either include or exclude technology based on our goals to make sure that the most goals are being met in the best way. I think we maybe can't always achieve all of them, but I'm curious, thinking about this question, if anyone would want to try and add technology, or maybe if there's technology you could streamline or take a step away from and see if it impacts your welcoming experience in any way.
I can speak a little to that. So in our experience, and we are staff at UBC, and we are LDDI, the unit that supports learning and technology in the Faculty of Education. It is very hard for us to keep up with the content that's in an online content for training our staff, because things keep on changing. Each role has their own responsibilities. So bringing in that context of what kind of onboarding they need to have, and then humanizing that experience stays a challenge. So what we do really is, because we have a lot of work and we cannot really spend time just working on these resources for onboarding, that the human element is so important that we kind of make it a blended experience. So the staff, while our modules are self-paced, whoever is in the new role, they can go through the modules, but then it is the manager's responsibility as well as to guide them through that experience and tell them, you know, what is relevant, what is not. Another interesting thing that we do, especially with the students who come and work with us, that when their term finishes and they are leaving, we actually ask them to go through the onboarding training and update the content for us. Because the technology have changed, things have changed, they have learned a lot during that experience. And when they joined, there were gaps, so maybe something they found that wasn't up to date, and they learned something new, something they wanted to add, and leave some comments for the next onboarding with the new people. So we find that thing really time saving for us, and a way for these students to give back to us as well.
That's a cool process. I really like hearing that kind of the iterative, you still get to iterate the training to make it relevant, but you're giving the staff a chance to participate in that process. And also, as the people who probably know the roles the most closely, they're the ones who are able to make those changes. That's really interesting. I'm seeing that Bree also does that. That's very validating to hear. Yeah, I think this is, even though technology can be super, super helpful, and we've found it to be very helpful in our context, I think keeping that personal element is really important. And that might not come in the form of technology. That might come in the form of a face-to-face interaction, whether that's on a computer or in person. And yeah, it's good to keep an eye on the balance of, like, you know, what do we have? What can we use? Maybe not always a question of what we want to use, but we move with the cards that are dealt to us. We did have one final quick little, I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Yes. We have one final slide. Katie, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Yeah, so you do have, oh, sorry. So everyone now has access to these slides. And we all wear different hats and have different opportunities to onboard or have welcoming experiences that we host and facilitate. And so there are lots of questions that you probably are starting to think about as a result of attending this session, but probably haven't concluded anything. And so I want to encourage you to go back to the individual reflection questions, as well as the 2 questions that we've used for our last little bit, and consider the tech used in your onboarding and the goals of onboarding, and then ask, like, do these align? Do these make sense together? Is there an opportunity to streamline a process, or perhaps is there an opportunity to take something away? And it's so normal, I think, when we get excited about a tech tool, especially for those of us who are really interested in this area, to think, oh, I'll add this in. And then we come to that point of how do we make sure that we also don't overwhelm folks, as has come up. So I want to encourage you, if this is resonating with you at all, to go back to your team, go back to perhaps it is teaching assistants that you work with, or student staff teams, and think, how can we make our onboarding better by either implementing or removing those educational or those technical tools. I think that brings us to 3 p.m. Or 3 p.m. PST, if you're joining us from a different time zone. I want to respect that your time might be different, but we'd love to stay in touch. There you've got the links to our LinkedIn. It's always a fun opportunity to reconnect or connect with folks, especially since we're both a little bit distant from UBC these days. And I want to recognize that these slides were developed from a template from SlidesGo. So shout out to SlidesGo for being a great tool. And just thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for presenting. Amazing presentation. We learned a lot. Any final comments, any feedback from anyone in the audience? It's 3:01. We are about to close the session. This was our last presentation. We are really excited, and thank you everyone for coming. Your presence made a huge difference. It brought us together as a learning community, and we learned a lot from different sessions. We had a variety of presentation. We'll be posting the recordings on our website, so please continue the conversation, and hopefully we'll see you next time in our next TEC Expo. Natasha, would you like to say some final comments?
Just another amazing day, right, with such rich conversations and presentations. So I would like to thank everyone for participating, coming today, and I hope we'll see you at next TEC Expo next year.